Okay, good evening, everyone. We're now at 7, so I'd like to call tonight's regular council meeting to order, please. I'm assuming that our live feed is live and running. Okay, very good. Welcome to those that are viewing online. I do wish to begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on the territories of the South and Shawnee Nations, and we're here today with gratitude. So council, I'll turn your attention please to item number 3, which is approval of tonight's agenda, though I do wish to make an amendment. So the approval motion would read that the agenda for December 12th, 2022 regular meeting of council be adopted as amended with 10.1, item 10.1, move to immediately follow 4.2. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Beddoes. All those in favor, please. That's unanimous. Thank you. So we're moving up item 10.1. Okay, so that moves right into our item number 4, which is our public hearing that we have tonight. So I do have a statement that I would like to read as we open this up. So this public hearing is being held pursuant to the Local Government Act. At this public hearing, any person who believes that their interest in property is affected by the proposed bylaw will be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard or to present written submissions respecting matters contained in the bylaw that are the subject of this hearing. Copies of written submissions received to date are available. It is important that all who speak at this hearing restrict their remarks to matters contained in the bylaw, and it is my responsibility as chair of this hearing to ensure that all remarks are so restricted. For those of you who wish to speak, please at the appropriate time commence your address to council by clearly stating your name and municipality of residence or local government. Then you may give us the benefit of your views concerning the proposed bylaw. Submissions must be received before or during the public hearing in order to be considered by council. Members of council may, if they so wish, ask questions of you following your presentation or submission. However, the main function of council members this evening is to listen to the views of the public. It is not the function of council at this public hearing to debate the merits of the proposed bylaw with individual citizens. Everyone who deems their interest in property to be affected shall be given the opportunity to be heard at this hearing. No one will be or should feel discouraged or prevented from making their views known. Please note that this hearing forms part of tonight's regular meeting of council and as such is being video recorded. Videos and their contents, including any personal information disclosed during the public hearing, will be posted and remain on the district's website. So on that note, I would like to turn over to staff for your presentation on item 4.1, zoning amendment bylaw number 871-600-93 2022.
Thank you. Brief presentation tonight. The proposed rezoning is to the service commercial C3 zone. It's to remove retail and office uses, which are currently in that zone as a accessory use, and to add health services, office, personal services, and retail to the permitted uses under that section. There's currently 13 parcels within the district that are zone C3. 6 of those are within the town center. 5 are just outside the town center adjacent to Highway 14, and 2 of the parcels are within Kaltassin. Should this bylaw come to adoption, the C1, C2, and C3 zones would all include restaurant, retail, office, health services, and personal services as permitted uses. This is being proposed as an effort to create more economic development benefit within our community and to provide for more opportunity within the town center specifically of parcels that may have a C3 zoning. As I mentioned, there's 6 of those to be able to have retail, office, health service, and personal services included as permitted uses. So with that, I'll conclude and leave the remaining portion of this to the public hearing for the public. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Powell. Now ask if council has any technical questions of staff regarding this amendment. Go ahead, Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Powell. Our last first and second.
Just for clarity, I'm tightening up on procedures. There is no through the chair. You direct everything to the chair, and I'll determine as chair if the question will be answered and considered by staff.
Okay, thank you, your worship. So through you, not through you. Say that again, to you.
There is no through the chair.
Okay.
So all questions, including questions or anything, comes right at the chair. Any comments from the public are to the chair. Questions come to the chair.
Okay,
I will absorb them and then say, staff, can you please answer that? But there
Okay.
is no through the chair. You can't like knock me out of my seat here. I'm here and there's no through the chair.
okay, so. To you as chair.
Yes.
I'd like to ask Mr. Powell, at our first and second reading, there was discussion, we might be able to advance this to adoption. I think that's the next item on the agenda. If we receive permission from the Ministry of Transportation. So that permission was granted, was it?
Yes, so thank you, Councillor Bateman.
Oh, sorry, I should look.
I am of the opinion that that has been received, but clarity to staff, if you could please answer.
That's correct. We do have that permission to proceed, given the authorization from the province.
Any other technical questions? Well, thank you, Councillor Bateman. Other other technical questions from members of council? Go ahead, Councillor Pearson.
I'm afraid to talk.
Pearson. Oh,
I recognize
To the
Councillor St. Pierre, so he will go ahead
Oh,
and
okay,
then you
sorry.
may speak after him, Councillor Pearson. Go ahead, please, Councillor St. Pierre.
To the chair, I believe that in previous discussion of the various C zones, we had talked briefly about the possibility of simplifying the various zonings so that each one simply allowed further uses and all included the previous use. At that point in time, I believe staff mentioned that that process might be considered at some point. I just wanted a reminder of when that might come up, and I forget exactly what the answers given at that time were.
Thank you, Councillor. Over to staff, please.
Yes, I recall that discussion from the previous meeting, when we considered first and second reading. The anticipated date for that would be following adoption of the official community plan so that we could then begin the review of the zoning bylaw and do a more comprehensive review of all of our zones where something to that effect of including the subsequent zones being included in the higher level ones. For the purposes of this proposal tonight, for the proposed amendment, it would be looking just at those 4 items that I had mentioned for permitted uses. So again, we would consider looking at those items that you mentioned at the zoning bylaw review.
Okay, Councillor Pearson.
Yes, to the chair. I'm really appreciative of this, starting to move this C1, C2, C3 zoning in a more streamlined use. My question to you is, what was this presentation made to our economic development officer upon her arrival in Suka? Is she aware of, is she bringing some best practices from elsewhere that might aid in economic development with simplification in our zones? And that may be a future, as the director of planning just talked about it, but the discussion, but I really think this is important to not lose sight of in our economic development for downtown. So,
Good question.
and my comment is, thank you to staff for simplifying this process, because it has been complicated and an irritant for some time.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Over to our CAO.
So this item, among others, is has been part of the discussion that the Director of Planning as well as our Community Economic Development Officer have had. And certainly as we progress through the official community plan adoption and then ultimately the zoning bylaw review, those conversations will continue. So as a good starting point with this proposed amendment, that is setting the stage now to have more opportunity for economic development within Souk.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. So follow up, Councillor St. Pierre.
Not with this particular item. I'm curious as to when we can actually get our screens on. Because right now I can't actually see the staff display, and I'm wondering if all the other councils have that issue or not.
Okay, so we got nothing. I have nothing. Is there a?
Good.
For those viewing online, we're just working through a technical issue. So while these screens are moving, I guess the question would be for those watching online, is there a shared screen? Do they see? They don't rely on this particular screen to see what we're doing. Okay. The connections from the main computer. Okay, got it. Excellent. Okay, now that we have something to look at, that's fine. I would now like to open up the public hearing for any members of the public here tonight that wish to speak specifically to the zoning amendment bylaw for number 871 that's here in front of us. So it's specific to the changes to service commercial C3 zone. Any members of the public that are here to speak on this, I'll call for a second time. Well, thank you for being in the gallery this evening. I'm delighted to see real humans with us. Just third and final time. Okay, so I'm seeing no public here to speak on this item tonight. So I will now close that particular item and return actually just to our corporate officer. I can now officially close the public hearing because we've received the staff report. There's no follow-up questions from members of council because no members of the public have spoken. So the public hearing then is officially closed. And now council, in front of us here is a recommendation, and that would be that council give third reading to the bylaw cited as zoning amendment bylaw number 871 600-93 2022. Moved by Councillor Pearson and seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Councillor Pearson, would you like to motivate on this? You don't have to, I'm just giving you that.
I think I already did.
Okay,
It's a good motion
okay.
and it's a good bylaw change. Thank you.
Councillor St. Pierre, any comments? Anything from anyone else? No. So I'll call the question. All those in favor, please. None opposed. That's unanimous. We do have the ability to adopt this item tonight. So I would recommend that council adopt the bylaw cited as zoning amendment bylaw number 871 600-93 2022.
So
Moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor Beddoes. Any questions on adoption? That was weird. I'll call the question. All those in favor? None opposed, and that's unanimous. Okay, great. Thank you very much. That's enough. Okay, so now we're going to move to item 10.1, which is employee service awards. So there isn't any formal motion, but on behalf of all of council, we wish to recognize and thank our staff for their long service here with the District of Sauk. We wish to recognize Medea Mills for 15 years, Laura Hooper for 15 years, Teresa Perget for 10 years, Jessica Boquist for 5 years, Angela Sinclair for 5 years, Christina Handy for 5 years, Carolyn Machada, 5 years, Benjamin Temple, 5 years, and Grayson Kerr for 5 years. We recognize that we're changing a lot in municipality. There's a lot of things that have been happening. Some members of council have changed. Some of your direct leadership has changed, but you're all finding a way to hang in there with us and to give your very best. And so on behalf of all of us, we just want to thank you for your due diligence, the kindness that you show, and just your strong service to not only the district, but to our community as a whole. So thank you for all that you do. And I know that we have a few members of staff in the gallery, so I will present you directly with yours. So there's Ms. Hooper's. And I seem to have dropped these on the way up, so they're no longer in order. This one. Ooh, okay, so I think we just have 2 members of staff here for these. So if Ms. Hooper, if you're comfortable. We also have a special pin, just. Carolyn Machado, our corporate officer, is making her way up to the front. And we will distribute the rest to our staff members tomorrow. So thank you very much, everyone, for that. And of course, you're both welcome to stay with us through the duration of the meeting. Yeah, one's already pretty much out the door and. Yeah, okay. So into the regular flow of our agenda, our next item up is adoption of meeting minutes, regular council meeting. The following minutes of council to be adopted as circulated. We have November 14th, regular council meeting for adoption. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Beddoes. Questions or corrections? That gets a full gold star from Councillor Bateman. So all those in favor, please. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Next up is our delegation section. We have 3 tonight. Our first one up, we'd like to welcome our RCMP quarterly update from our acting staff sergeant, Kevin Shaw.
Evening. Thank you for making time for me tonight. Congratulations to everybody. Nice to see you again. Everybody re-elected and different time period, I see. I think we're a little bit behind. So this quarterly update is from our second quarter, which spanned July to September. So it won't necessarily be relevant to what we're seeing in the community right now, but I'll do my best to answer any questions there may be concerning immediate topics. Through Q2 took us through the end of the summer and into the beginning of September. Really nothing overly remarkable to report, which I'm always happy to share. Just some general trends. Honestly, no profound insights into this. Assaults were up year over year. I took a look into that. No particular reason for it. Things we'd qualify as person offenses, though, along the same lines, uttering threats were significantly down. So some balance there in sort of our person's crimes as we monitor any particular trends that we can respond to. As far as property crime and offenses, a general trend of down, significance, draw significance from break and enters to residences down, theft from vehicles down, general thefts down as well, with everything else remaining relatively static. So I think that's positive for our community over the summer. We did have a significant rash, albeit quite short-lived, of arson offenses. We were able to quickly identify the person responsible for that. And within a matter of days, there was arrests and charges have been approved by the Crown. That matters before the courts and appears to be quite an isolated incident. They did run the risk of becoming a bit more serious as they progressed. Their locations became a bit more concerning, the final location at a gas station. So we're happy to be able to put a person to that offense and end that as quickly as possible. Some good help from the community and good work by our team. The only thing significantly up that's occupying a deal of our time and of community concern would be our response again to mental health related calls, significantly up over this time last year and still high through this year in Q2. I expect Q3 probably trending the same way. So that's a concern that we monitor, of course, with partnerships in our community. We are not the be all end all of response to mental health. In fact, if we come, that's probably means we've missed other steps along the way. So we continue to make sure that we're engaging with professionals, an integrated mobile crisis response team. We rely on very heavily, which of course the district pays into, as well as connections with other outreach services, community services that are available within the district of Suq, of which there are many, and we do rely on them. I've recently engaged in a working group with Island Health as well, just to make sure our interface with them is as meaningful as it can be for the people that we're serving in this realm. So positive progress, but numbers remain high. I'll maybe pause there if sometimes there's questions about particular trends or incidents that have occurred within the community. If now's a good time to pause for that, Mayor Tate.
Councillor St. Pierre.
To the chair, I am aware that the Just Institute provides a mental health first aid course, and I'm reasonably sure that our officers may have already used such. So if there's anyone trained within the staff to actually teach that type of material, and whether or not our district staff were actually equipped, especially on the front lines, with that kind of information and training.
Any thoughts?
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't have any particular information to that. We receive ongoing, consistent training and retraining in multiple areas, one of them being certainly mental health. It's standardized to a large degree from the province. I don't know of that particular training course, but certainly great information. Happy to look into it if it's something that we can supplement for our team. We're always looking for those sort of opportunities for sure.
Councillor Beddoes.
To the chair, I'm interested to know if the other municipalities are experiencing the same uptick and the same numbers. It's not unique to Suq. I just want to confirm that.
Any thoughts on any regional, like comparatives regionally?
I can't speak for certain on that. My general sense, so we are engaged with other municipalities. I attend monthly meetings with other chiefs and police and detachment commanders, as well as a number of integrated groups. Mental wellness and our response to that is often a topic multi-jurisdictionally. So while I can't say unequivocally, yes, everywhere sees the same trend, it is top of list for a lot of places right now, for sure. The only other updates I just wanted to touch on were just some of our goal setting for the year that we did, of course, in consultation with the district. Just 3 quick areas just specific to the district of Suq. One of our priorities that we'd identified together this year was efforts to enhance road safety. We measure these efforts quarterly in a number of areas. So Q2 is halfway through the year for us, so we take a close look at the way we're trending on things. We had a goal to increase our impaired driving enforcement year over year. We have a group of incredibly dedicated investigators when it comes to impaired driving, when it comes to all sorts of things, but particular impaired driving, which is easy to agree. The benefit of that is beyond measure. So sometimes these stats are sort of unfortunate to report, but there is no shortage of impaired driving enforcement to be done. We set a goal of a 5% increase on that enforcement this year, and we're well above 50% of our efforts to meet that target. So we're going to look for opportunities to engage with some partners and to engage with the public ourselves, maybe on just an awareness campaign. Particularly, as the Christmas season approaches and other things, we are going to be out there. We are going to be continuous enforcement. And, I'd love to be disappointed that we didn't have good numbers in this area, because that would reflect our community making good decisions. But until then, we're going to be out there, and our team's doing a really good job dedicating their efforts toward that. We set a goal this year to focus on distracted and aggressive driving. Again, a precursor to motor vehicle collisions. We are 75% of our goal for the year, at the halfway mark of meeting those goals, which again is good and bad. I feel like every time I'm here, I don't necessarily have good news. Our successes are sort of reflective of bad things sometimes. But and then one thing we wanted to do this year is just in a number of areas, but particularly related to road safety, is just really enhance our presence in school zones. So we are tracking that. We didn't necessarily set a goal for that, but really active in those school zones, largely before school. We try and be there after school as well. And that plays into a bit of our efforts this year to just re-engage with communities, particularly after COVID, and to get back into some places in the community. So community events have offered that, but schools certainly offer that opportunity as well. We're hoping to plan to teach 2 DARE classes this year, drug awareness and resistance education classes, which are delivered through police in 2 schools this year, which will double what we were able to contribute last year. So not as much as we'd like to, but a step in the right direction. And then crime reduction. So we set a goal to prioritize proactive enforcement. Again, at halfway, we've reached 50% of that target as well. Some of that is sort of dependent on the situations that present themselves, but we've been able to capitalize on a few situations and get ahead of some trends that we've seen. So we're on target to meet that goal as well. We'd already talked about the arsons, but again, on that line, just being really aggressive when we see those trends starting. And we met with some success there. That was it for that. If there's any questions.
Question I have is related to the DARE program. That's usually delivered to grade 5 classes. Is that correct? Or does it vary? And just on that is because for a couple of years, the schools were all closed to outside visitors. So some, if it was grade 5, would have missed that opportunity, in which case would a middle school opportunity be considered to sort of catch those students up because of the closures?
Thank you, Your Worship. That's a good question. I think you're correct. It's delivered in the elementary school levels. I don't know if that education is tailored necessarily to the older demographic in our schools. Certainly something I can look into with the trained members that deliver that, and something to consider for sure, because there will be a gap of 2 years of students that would have missed that opportunity for sure.
Councillor Bateman, you had an earlier question?
Yeah, so to you, Chair, and I'm going to look at the Sergeant Shaw while I ask the question. Is that okay? Okay, so I'm going to look at you since I'm addressing the question to you. These mental health calls. Now, obviously, there's a spectrum of these calls. In a situation where you need to act immediately, is there a way for you to liaise with mental health professionals within the community? Are they on call to join you on a call?
Yeah, good question. Yes and no. The integrated mobile crisis response team runs in non-business hours, although not 24/7, and generally speaking outside of a crisis helpline, which we don't interface with. We really are the option for people outside of business hours at this point in time, that I'm aware of. Of course, there's probably things out there that I'm not aware of.
So follow-up to you would be in this Island Health Working Group. Do you see some sort of ideal future ahead for this?
Yeah, I have plenty of ideas of what might be ideal in a utopic sort of environment for us. But I think the trend has been and needs to continue to be an integration between mental health professionals and police. We can, of course, be as informed, as engaged, and as educated as we can be, but we have to acknowledge that we're not professionals in the mental health field, and it's not our mandate. Aside from the immediate concern for the health and safety of individuals or community members, I'd love to see a continued push for integration. There are some departments that are stepping sort of outside our current models and enhancing those integrations. But it's a question of resources on both sides, on the medical side and on the policing side as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Pearson, then Lajeunesse.
Yes, I see to the chair, the top 3 items that Mr. Shaw has brought forward are road safety, distracted and aggressive driving, school zones. My question's around that second one, distracted and aggressive driving. Are there any trends that are arising out of delays in getting home, like the Cicino school crawl that starts somewhere back by Sunny Shores? Is distracted driving, are they seeing trends in the distracted driving? Because somebody are filling their time, and what about the aggressive driving behavior?
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. I can tell you, again, I have limited information on that. A fulsome answer would include a considerable amount of speculation. We had a concentrated effort during rush hour, westbound at Church Road and Souk Road near Souk Elementary, that resulted in a significant amount of distracting driving tickets, specifically cell phone use while driving. It's a bit of a balance. The cars have to be going slow enough for us to see that and make an effective stop of the vehicle. So that's where we were. We weren't there necessarily due to the congestion, but it was beneficial to us and our ability to enforce it. Beyond that, I would speculate on whether people are filling their time or what their motivation is for those contraventions. And aggressive driving, a little more challenging to target in Souk, quite frankly. We do get a lot of phone calls for service in and around the 4 lanes where traffic opens, and depending on which direction you go. Yeah, aggressive driving is more an offense that's reported to us versus what we actually find committing. And there are avenues to pursue that with civilian witness statements, and we can still lay a charge on the Motor Vehicle Act with those. I would suggest typically on the eastern side of our jurisdiction is where we see those most often.
Thank you. Councillor Lajeunesse.
Yeah, this is just an observation that I've made over the past dozen or so years, that there seems to be a lot more head-on collisions than we've ever experienced in the past. And I have to assume that this is mostly as a result of distracted driving. Because I just don't quite understand how you can drive into an oncoming vehicle unless you're not watching the road. And so I'm wondering if there are any efforts being made to educate people on the effects of having a head-on collision. I think like maybe the CRD could have an education campaign with television commercials and social media campaign to educate people on the harsh reality of what happens when you run into another car coming at you. I think it's something that's overdue. And I mean, showing the graphic reality without identifying individuals, but I think the impaired driving laws have been very effective over the years, but it's taken a long time to get there. And I think with the distracted driving laws, we need to speed it up a little bit. I don't know if that's a question, but
Just to the point on the CRD, there is no transportation authority established at this time, although that is a motivation that the new board has. So potentially, but right now, and depending on where that goes, it would not fall into the regional district. It doesn't, it's not a regional authority piece service at this point in time. Any thoughts?
I think, your local police certainly wouldn't be an authority on sort of the mechanics of that. I think your point's well taken. Statistics on that will be challenging because very few people in a head-on collision will admit during the investigation that they were driving while distracted. Typically, I can think of 2 head-on collisions recently, and I believe the justification behind both of them were fatigue, that the drivers claimed to have fallen asleep. In lots of circumstances, we're forced to take them at their word. So I'm certainly not second guessing that. But yeah, I mean, education, I'm thinking about ICBC Road Safety BC as people well equipped to share that message in an effort to sort of a continued effort to reduce distracted driving. I mean, the more addicted we all become to devices, the more it takes away from all sorts of things, and the most dangerous being driving, I think.
Yeah, you don't really want to put an ad on a device because then people would be viewing the ad and not the road, right? So. Radio, we'll stick to radio. Radio is good. Okay. Thank you. Just one last sorry, you might have more to.
I do just have one last thing. I saved the most important for, I was gonna say best for last, and if he's watching, I didn't mean it. We did share with Mayor Tate a few months ago that Staff Sergeant Sinden has been permanently transferred to our Island District Headquarters. And so our detachment commander position remains officially vacant, although he's been gone for quite some time. Efforts have been underway and in consultation with all the communities that we serve to fill that position. It's going by way of promotion, and that job opportunity was advertised last week. So the process has begun and we will eagerly await its results. But it will be a number of months until that's filled. So status quo until then, but I know Brett really enjoyed his time here. And of course, he didn't know when his last time here was that it would be his last, but he appreciates your support, as do we all. And I'll keep you posted on when that position's filled, and look forward to introducing the successor to you when the time comes.
Okay, well, on behalf of all of us, thank you very much, and please send our congratulations to Mr. Sinden, and thank you for filling in this time that we have. Just on another note, we haven't officially struck committees. Council wants to take some time to do that, but we are sort of on board with launching those task forces to be able to navigate and move a little bit more nimble, in which case I've reached out to Councillor Beddoes to assist in this area, as well as Councillor Pearson. So we would like to set up a meeting in the next while. We are growing rapidly, in which to probably have a bit more informal conversations on the impacts of that growth, and would like to reach out to you just to share some thoughts back and forth.
Anytime. I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Be in touch. All right, thank you very much. Okay, so our next item is 6.2. We have one on good governance and leadership concerns. We have a presentation by Clement Ezegby, I believe. Perhaps you can just educate me, please, on the correct pronunciation of your last name. Ezegby.
Yes.
Okay, if you could please have a seat and turn on the microphone. The way our delegation system works is that you have up to 5 minutes to do your presentation, and then should council have any follow-up, they'll reach out after the meeting or at a different time, put a notice of motion forward, that sort of thing. But the 5 minutes would be yours uninterrupted.
Okay. Yeah, I want to mention something about the police before I continue.
Well, the time is yours. You have 5 minutes, so go ahead.
Yeah, what I want to say is, I don't think the police has to solve all the problem. I think they don't have enough capacity to be able to solve all the problem. And I'm suggesting that they might need to create more departments that will help the police to solve other problems. That is my suggestion. Yeah, but why I came today is to talk to you all, because I've been trying to reach many government officials in Ottawa, in Alberta. I've traveled many places because I've been fighting human rights for many issues. And also, nobody knows who I am. I'm a Canadian citizen born in Vancouver, BC. But my dad came back. My dad came here and took me back to Africa when I was 1 year old. So I'm a Canadian citizen born in Vancouver, BC. And I want to clarify that because I'm having issues with my identification. And also I have all my documents, and it has been an issue for me. And many things has been denied because of argumentation about my identification. And my document is not forged. And I don't know how they obtain those stories that my document is forged. And also communication. You know, when you try to reach the government officials, you know, you call them on the phone, send them an email, they don't reply emails. And also they don't communicate with anybody. How can you solve a problem if they don't pick up their phones or reply their emails? And that's a big problem. You know, and without communication, I don't think without communication, it's very, very difficult to solve any problem. And this is what I try to mention all the time. I've been writing them many emails, even if they don't want to meet with you or they don't want to talk to you, they should be able to reply, to say something. Because they provided email, provided their phone numbers. If they cannot be able to use those channels to communicate with the people, I think they should shut it down. It is better. Okay, and also, why I came here, because it's always good to speak out, because I've been sending emails. I've been trying to solve my problems, and also I believe it's an organized crime, because what they have done to me is they made in a way to create many social media accounts under my name, and it has been affecting me to get a job, and I don't know how to be able to solve all these problems. I have communicated with human rights, and I have communicated with United Nations. So those things are my problem. I don't know what else to do. For almost 11 years, this thing has been happening. And I believe is a crime that is being done through the internet. And the power is out of my hands to be able to stop it. But for 11 years, I send my resumes, nobody calls me for job because of all those profiles that are being made under my name. Yes. You know, and also coming here is also to introduce myself, because I always come to Souk. And also I don't know anybody. I don't have any, I came here alone. So why I came here today is also to prove myself, because I don't have anything that I'm doing other than I'm receiving benefit from the government. I'm not making any money anywhere, and also I'm not doing any kind of criminal activity. So I want to clarify that. And I would, if I knew, I would have brought my resume to show my previous experiences, because I'm not into any type of criminal activity. And also I obey the laws, and also I'm a Christian, and also I'm not a Muslim, because all those things, they have made many false allegations with my name, and I don't know how those things come about. So they compromise my name in many ways.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yes.
For coming to us today. I think the only guidance I would have is that this video is on our website. So everything you said is recorded. It's on the
Yes.
website and wouldn't be noted as a delegation under your name. You mentioned that your home is Vancouver. You know, often with members of parliament, their time is in Ottawa. So often they do get emails or phone calls to their constituency office. But if you went to the office, there's staff there that might be able to help you. Or your member of legislative assembly. Like, again, they're traveling back and forth to and from. But here we don't do identification, like we don't issue IDs as a municipality. I mean, we issue tax receipts for property taxes, but beyond that, I can only really direct you to either an MP or an MLA to help navigate that.
Yeah, well, that is the problem. The communication, there's no communication. So I reach everybody, you know, I try to communicate with everybody to see who can be able to speak to me on what is happening. That is the problem. There's no communication. There's no response. So it's hard for me to be able to know what direction to take, or even to hear from people.
Yeah, I would just go to the constituency office, like rather than email, is just go there in person. They all have physical offices within the ridings to service the residents that live in that riding.
Okay.
And then there's usually the staff work there, even if the member of parliament or the legislator is not in the office that day.
Okay.
Or a lawyer. That's all I got.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, it's very good to speak.
Yes.
You know, at least because when you speak, you might have just to get suggestion on what to do.
And that would help. It's just local governments are not like it's not in our jurisdiction. So I could help you with property taxes or bylaw or building permits, but community grants, but in terms of proper identification, it would likely be your member of parliament. And I would go to the constituency office in your riding and ask for help that way. They all do casework. Some do it better than others, but that is the work they do.
Okay,
Well, good luck.
thank you very much.
We answered our phone, just saying. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, our next delegation tonight, 6.3, is a presentation by Herb Haldane with this representing the Souk Builders Association. And this is bylaw 404 requirements for one lot subdivision. Mr. Haldane, you have up to 5 minutes.
Hello. The reason I came here today, I did meet with the approving officer and a senior staff member of the engineering department, and we did go over some issues and we did come to some understanding. But more the reason I came here today was to point out some of the irregularities with regard to one lot subdivisions. A one lot subdivision, to give you an idea now, I mean, before COVID, it used to cost around between $30,000 and $40,000 to take a lot off the side of your parents' property or a rental property you have, and you want to take one lot of stuff. I did one here this last year. It took 3 years to get it to this point, and it's $106,134. So they're getting so expensive now that the average person, and the thing is with this 106,000, so you know, somebody has to come up with all that money. There's no loan department. There's no pay us later for any of this materials. These are engineers, geotechs, these are stormwater management systems, surveyors, district expectations for funds and fees and so on. So this takes me to a point with some of the stuff and expectations, because I'm helping a few people try to do one lot subdivisions. And most of them are regular working people. The one guy that I'm helping right now, he makes $27 an hour. He's a single dad, has a trailer on the property. He's trying to take one lot off. He doesn't have $100,000. So he's got the rezoning. We did that last year, but he's never going to be able to subdivide this lot off because he doesn't have $100,000. So at this point, he's going to be stuck in the mud. So they do have in the Local Government Act, Section 514. And Section 514s are supposed to be about helping people who've lived on a piece of property for 5 years or longer be able to subdivide a lot off. And it talks in that section about it being for a family member. It's a family subdivision. There's also case law attached to it. So if you look it up online, you'll look up 514 Local Government Act, and it'll give you some of the case law court cases that have happened. And it's happened because municipalities try to talk people out of doing 514s, and they want you to go through the regular process. So they've gone to court. There was 2 there that were Saanich, and there was one that was Metchosin. So the provincial government wants people to be able to have this avenue, to be able to do a reasonable subdivision on a property for a family member. And it states in there, any family member. The whole idea behind that was so that somebody could do it for a reasonable amount of money. And if you've lived on the property for 5 years or more, you're obviously not doing it because you're into it for speculation or to flip properties and things like that. You know, these are family owned places. The other thing it talks about in there is that if you're not on city water, because you have to have septic systems, they want you to have 1 hectare. If you're on city water, they put it down to 2,500 square meters, which is about a half acre. But they do talk about in there that you can go down to a lower amount than that if you do it by bylaw within a municipality. And then the municipality can decide that maybe the town center could be 500 square meters, and you're out in the community growth area, maybe those are 800 square meters, and maybe when you're out rural, larger yet again. But back in March of 2022, so just this earlier part of the year, you guys moved it from 2,500 square meters up to 5,000 square meters. So I would wonder where that direction may or may not have come from. I'm sure council wasn't looking to try and make it tougher to do 514s. It should in fact have been made easier, because we're trying to make it affordable for families to be able to use their properties for their kids or their parents or brothers, sisters, and so on. So I'd like that to be looked at maybe somewhere down the line. The other thing is, with a standard regular subdivision in Souk, you've got a system, and I talked about it with one of your engineering staff. And if you look at a 20 lot subdivision, they expect streetlights on one side of the road. They expect only one side of the road. They expect sidewalks on one side of the road. So, and if I measured out the street lights properly on a larger lot subdivision, you got a street light about every 2 lots on the one side of the road and no street lights on the other side. So 1 street light for every 4 lots, roughly, for a larger lot subdivision. For the smaller lot subdivisions, there's 1 for every 6 lots. And sidewalk being only on one side of the road, you're really in a big lot subdivision, every second lot pays for half a sidewalk, or every lot pays for half a sidewalk, not a full sidewalk. In your servicing bylaw, it talks about every single 1 lot subdivision has to pay for a street light, and every single 1 lot subdivision has to pay for a full sidewalk. So really, it should be more affordable if you're doing a 1 lot subdivision, not less affordable. A 20 lot subdivision is more affordable per lot than a 1 lot subdivision is. So maybe that could be looked at sometime going forward. And I realize my 5 minutes is up. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Haldane, for raising this. We'll follow up.
Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that completes delegations. Item 7, report of the Chief Administrative Officer.
Your worship, I spent the afternoon at the CRD office working with the emergency management, the Regional Emergency Management Partnership Steering Committee, continuing on with the work that Mr. McInnes had started a couple of years ago when he first came here. It's an interesting group and an interesting focus on how region as a whole might respond to emergencies that take place in more than one jurisdiction at a time. So that was, I've attended a number of those meetings and they're very profitable, and I'm hoping I'm making some sort of a positive contribution to them. And I also wanted to let council know that we have a number of fairly dedicated people who are working on making our office somewhat more Christmassy this year. And we've had a couple of contests, and there are a couple more coming up where staff's taking part. And we had Councillor Beddoes judging our soup day last Tuesday. Yeah, it was a tough call for him. I don't believe there were any bad soups on serve at that time. So it was a treat for him. So just leading into the holiday season, your worship, we're doing our best to spruce up the office and keep everybody's spirits up.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. On behalf of all of us, we do want to recognize that as staff is doing that for the holidays, it's also bringing awareness and fundraising for many charities here in Souk, the United Way, the Backpack Project. I think there's others as well that are all a part of that. So, you know, while there is the fun and camaraderie, it's also nice that you're thinking of others in our community that really need that helping hand right now. So also want to recognize the crews that were out with the fire trucks on the 4 shifts that went out throughout the community. I couldn't get the tracker to work. I know that other people could, obviously, but I couldn't. So maybe we need to do a bit of a tutorial on that, or maybe it's me. I just couldn't get it to work. The tracker, I had no idea where the truck was. I just couldn't figure it out. So it's either the phone or something, probably a user fail. But just want to recognize all that work because it was to support our local food bank. And I know there's many organizations that are turning their mind to that, but just with the Sea Parks also doing it through the Festival of Trees and others, and raising funds and awareness for the Children's Hospital. So all these things just spark. So just want to thank from all of us, acknowledge and thank you all for that work as well. And we know that we want to wrap stuff up nicely for the end of the year, but we also know that sometimes things need to bridge into the new year as well. So for now, though, let's recognize we have a fresh new year with potential and possibilities awaiting. Okay, thank you. Okay, so moving on, item 8, public question and comment period. And the member of the public is leaving right when we open for the public. So I'll just invite any member that would like to speak on any other outstanding items except for the public hearing. This is your one and only opportunity. Up to 2 minutes. Seen those have spoken, so we'll move on. Thank you, though, for being here. We'll move on to item 9, which is our consent agenda. The recommendation is that item 9.1 be adopted by general consent. Moved by Councillor Beddoes, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. All the question then, are you looking to extract? Okay, so let's put a hand up and say, Chair, I need to speak. Thank
Chair, I
you.
need to speak to you directly, and I did recommend that you pull this one, was item D, the guiding lights across BC. Since you are a former Girl Guide
Clearly not prepared.
and
Thank
future
you.
Girl Guide, perhaps. So this item just strictly states, last February, Councillor Beddoes and I attended, you were out of town, so this was the blue light event. And they're seeking our interest again in doing this again on February 22nd, 2023. So perhaps staff could contact the BC Council, the Girl Guides of Canada, and indicate our interest in doing this again.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask staff for a bit of help for this. So we have an item that we want, obviously Councillor Bateman has spoke to the ask for that. So what would be of benefit to ensure that this is captured? We've done lights here. I do remember you did lights somewhere here
Just
last
here.
year, and I think they were here. We had the pot lights up in previous years. So is that, we close out again? Do you need a staff report? What are you looking for?
Your worship, a quick resolution of council to direct staff to reach out to the BC Girl Guides group to see what we can do to add to the blue lights campaign would be ideal. That would put it in and make sure it didn't get lost.
Okay, so because we have a motion on the floor, we will look at extracting them. We'll come back to this motion because we have one on the floor and that's to receive, but we can do sort of a motion arising, and I'll go to Councillor Bateman for that motion arising that will come. Okay, Councillor Lajeunesse, do you have another item you wish to pull? No? Does anyone else have anything? Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, item L, this refers to the Canada Summer Jobs Program, and I was curious to know if the district was taking advantage of that program. The deadline is January 12th of this year.
We have in the past, but perhaps I'll ask our CAO the deadline for Canada job in the summer. Do we know if we're applying?
We'll have to discuss that. Ms. Gray and I will have a discussion about that tomorrow, your worship, because we did have it pointed out to us that the deadline was coming up fairly quickly.
Yeah, so that will be more of an internal HR piece. Anything else, Councillor Bateman? Okay, so we'll deal with the motion that's on the floor first, and that is to the consent agenda, which captures the correspondence. So really by moving the motion, we would do this automatically. So all those in favor, please. And that's unanimous. Thank you. You don't require, just to our corporate officer, you don't require another motion because this is part of the consent agenda, right?
Is it to direct staff to contact the Girl Guides?
No, the motion that we moved was to move the consent agenda, which captures the whole correspondence block. So you wouldn't need another motion because this is part of the consent agenda.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, so then the business arising would be then that council directs staff to connect with the Girl Guides regarding the 2023 guiding lights across BC event. That'll capture that. Okay, so business arising by Councillor Bateman, thank you, and seconded by Councillor Beddoes. Good catch on that. Any question, Councillor Lajeunesse?
Yeah, just we get requests to do these things throughout the year, and you can get rope lights that you can change the colors just with an app on your phone. And we could, I bought some and I have them lining the railings on my deck, and I think they're 16 or 20 feet long per string, and you can daisy chain them together so that they all work together. And if we were to get some of those, you can leave them up and change the color, so it doesn't have to be a big deal every time we want to do one of these things.
I suppose that'll be an option. I think it just depends. I have several Christmas lights and none of them decided to work this year. So nothing, right? You think you got it and then suddenly you just don't, but we'll leave that in the hands of our capable staff to determine the blue lights. Sometimes the old just screw it in and screw it out just works perfectly. All right, so call the question. All those in favor, please. And that's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, we've finished 10.1, so that brings us to 10.2. So this is UBCM Development Approvals Grant Update. Turn it over to staff, please.
Perfect. Thank you, Your Worship. To Your Worship and to Council. Brief report tonight. It's just an update on the Development Approvals Program staff's been working on. So in the beginning of or halfway through 2021, the district received a grant for almost $500,000 to go forward with the Development Approvals Program. We started the program near the end of 2021 and we've been progressing it through 2022. This presentation is going to review tasks we've completed to date in 2022, outline the tasks we have planned for 2023, and then consultation strategy for our draft subdivision development standards bylaws. That's one of the items that we have completed in 2022. The program final report is expected to be delivered to council prior to December 2023 when we complete it through next summer. So the Development Approvals Program just going to change slides here. Updating all our existing procedures, bylaws, and processes. Our main focus was looking at building permits, the zoning amendments, development permits, and subdivisions. We focused in on the building permits, which we engaged a consultant with in 2022. They've gone through all the building permit processes right now, as well as procedures. They have recommendations. Recommendations are currently being reviewed by senior planning staff. Plan for 2023 is going to be engagement with the consultants to dive into the application processes for zoning amendments, as well as the development permits and subdivision applications. 2022 deliverables. There were a few things we were in process with. We really wanted to focus on refining and finishing those. So we've completed now the draft subdivision and development standards bylaw, which was a major undertaking. It's a very large bylaw and it's essentially rules of engagement for developments within Sooke. Development cost charge program, not chart program. Sorry, that's a typo in the presentation. Council adopted the new bylaw in June 2022 for a development cost charge program. We work with the consultants on this to basically draft credit policies that will be applied uniformly. This will be presented to council in early 2023. And we've gone through developing an implementation manual for staff for consistent implementation of DCCs, as well as the credits, following council's consideration and approval of policies we've come up with, as well as developing website brochures just for the ease of developers to reference. Implementation of Bluebeam digital plan review software is another component we've implemented. This is a lot planning and engineering staff will use this. Really speeds up the time process and reviewing drawings, letting you do a lot of sort of digital measurement calculations on drawings as opposed to doing them by hand. We've implemented this software as well as put staff through training in this software. We've introduced Tempest land modules training to staff as well. Pretty much our database and land modules that are running all the in behind the scenes software. And like I said, the building process procedures, internal audits have been completed. The recommendations are sitting with senior staff right now with the recommendations that came from this audit. I skipped a slide here. Hang on. There we go. So 2023 deliverables going forward. We want to look at finalizing the building permit process, procedural audit. We've had the recommendations with our senior staff right now. Senior staff are going to look at these and we're going to engage with further consultants to conduct process audits on the procedures for the zoning amendments, development permits, as well as subdivisions. We're also going to introduce further Tempest law or land module software upgrades and continue with staff training on that, as well as Bluebeam. Implementation of digital web-based application portals are going to come into play. They're going to provide opportunities for digital document submissions as opposed to paper submissions, as well as online fee payment options. One of the recommendations in the report tonight, like I said, bylaw 404 was a major undertaking that we've completed the draft in 2022. And we're proposing basically a consultation strategy for council to approve tonight. So the draft bylaw has been completed. Like I said, this is a major bylaw. It's the rules of engagement for development within Sooke. So currently, now that the draft's been completed, it's been put forward to all the internal departments within Sooke. Staff are reviewing the bylaw. Following the staff review of the bylaw, professional engineering consultant review will be conducted. This will be done through traffic engineers, geotechs, other professional categories within engineering, as well as a lot of the consultants will be provided opportunity that are representing a lot of the developers in Sooke. Following the engineering review of the bylaw, it'll be provided to Urban Development Institute, Capital Region, UDI. And the next piece, part 4, will be to provide a draft bylaw to council. And this will be the same stage that will be done in unison with item 5 on here, which will be the public development, building community, public consultation. So staff will provide the draft to council. So council has a first look at what's going out to the development community for review. Staff will then work with our communications coordinator. We'll provide either online consultation or set up public engagement meetings that will involve the development of community. And we'll be able to receive all the input public, development community, building association has with the draft bylaw. Following the public consultation, we're going to have a third-party consultant engaged to do a final review as well as a format look at the bylaw. They will also take in all the consultation material that's been presented, all the feedback from the development community, and be able to provide a report on this as well as a finalized format of the draft subdivision bylaw. Following that review, it'll be put forward to district solicitors for a legal review and legislative review. Following that, a draft final bylaw will be presented to council for consideration in 2023. Recommendations in front of council for consideration tonight to receive the report for information, as well as to provide and direct staff to proceed with the next steps forward with the subdivision development standards consultation process and review of the bylaw. Here to answer any questions if you have them.
Okay, I'm certain we do. Just starting off in terms of timelines, can you back up a slide that just sort of shows the timelines here? So for item 4, when will the draft come to council?
Right now, the internal review, we're shooting for near the end of December to the end of January to have a fulsome staff review on the bylaw. Following that, we'll have consultation with the professional engineering review. That may be, this whole process might take most of 2023. It is a very comprehensive bylaw and it will take some time for review. Our goal would be to get item 2 done by probably January, February 2023. We could do item 3 in unison with that. And then we're hoping by April to have a draft bylaw presented to council. And it would be through January, February, and March. We'd work with our communications coordinator to develop the public consultation strategy, which would be done in unison with 4. So item number 5, we'd work with Ms. Moog on that and basically put something together so council can be provided with the draft in April. And at the same time, we could initiate the consultation process with the public as well as the development community.
Okay, so assuming April, I recommend that you bring it to a committee of the whole. I don't want to see it come to a regular council directly where members of the public are stuck with 2 minutes and we're hindered, not hindered, but our procedural bylaw limits our dialogue on it. So it must come to a committee of the whole. If you are unable to make that committee of the whole date work, then I strongly recommend you advise council on a delay. And if we need to call a different committee of the whole, we can certainly do that. But that's where it must come. And further, many of us are in touch with the UDI as well. So where I'm going with that is when other entities receive the information, we receive it also. But not directly. So sometimes I would caution you on sending something out when we haven't seen it, because we're going to see it anyway. And then it just starts this spin of that just really, quite frankly, puts me in a place of exhaustion, and I hate it. So even if you send it out with a CC to us for information, so we know what's floating out there, because in all likelihood, we're going to receive it anyway. In the report here, so moving on to the report, it references a consulting report. Let's see here. That has already been received. So when will council receive that report? Who was the consultant? How much of the grant was used to cover all of that?
Perfect. Yeah, to your worship, I can let Mr. Blewett here, he's managing the program, as well as Mr. Paolo, has the report in hand. They're reviewing some of the recommendations, and I can let them speak to that tonight.
Specifically to the building permit report, I'm meeting with the consultant tomorrow afternoon. So I'll have a better idea in terms of timelines when those those pieces of information can be released. The main thing with it is the initial recommendations that we received mentioned different aspects of the process. I'm going to be discussing a little bit more detail specifically to what we can make as changes now. And then also, as we progress in this review process, what can specifically development permit process, the zoning amendment process, how does that all get factored in, just to make sure that if we make one change now, it's not going to be detrimental once we finish off the other development process reviews. I'm not sure if Mr. Blewett has anything further that he wants to say specific.
To your chair, you asked questions about who the consultant was. So this is a local resident who lives in Souk with 30 plus years of experience in local government. LMH Consulting. So they provided us with an internal audit, meeting with every single staff member, looking at all the processes, basically looking at how Tempus is being utilized. Tempus is our land management software system, which basically allows people to, or allows staff to track applications. So she looked at all of those processes, best practices against municipality that she's been working with for years. So meeting with staff, opened the hood, checked out everything to see if how we're using it, what's working, what's not working, and has provided this report for us to review.
Okay, so at some point though, that report will come to council?
I believe so. That would be the plan. Yes.
Okay, and then with the consultant, it's great, someone with local government experience. My only caution there though is that every local government has a different focus or different culture in how they deal with planning. So it's the case of because I don't know which local government the consultant is affiliated with, it is to be objective and not to be like another municipality, because that may or may not be what works for us here, if that makes sense.
That makes absolute sense. So basically, this review wasn't necessarily, it was not specific to a comparison with another municipality. It was based on best practices and was really more around not so much the process related to policies. It was more about the process of how we're using the system, how we are moving forward with the day-to-day, working within our software, working within staff's resources. As Mr. Carter mentioned, there will be another consultant coming on who will then basically take the next step on this one. So this consultant was first hired on to implement eApply, which is our online, the ability for a person to make an online application. And because of the building permit issues we had earlier this year, we had to pivot, and this consultant was put onto the building permit review process and was really focused on an internal audit of how we can improve and work better with one another internally. This other consultant that will be brought on in 2023 will take it to the next level, meeting with the development community, also evaluating what this current consultant did and bringing it all together as a fulsome report with all parties involved.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Blewett. And just finally, before I go to members of council, when it comes to the district solicitor review, just similar there, some solicitor comments that I've seen here before, not to pick on anyone specifically, is it's a risk piece. So some would write an opinion based on the district having no risk at all. Local governments are risk adverse, though. Others would say, okay, you can absorb some of this risk, so what this looks like. And it's like if you read a waiver before anything, it basically, if you took it literally, you wouldn't do the activity. Right? Because, well, gosh, you know, like I'm going to use skydiving, for example, you know, you get this whole thing, you got to sign on it. Obviously, a solicitor that would read that would say you definitely should not be doing this because of blah, 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 blah. So if I was to take that advice, we probably wouldn't develop. If I use that in soup, the analogy would be that we just wouldn't do anything, wouldn't develop anything, too much risk, because there's risk in everything. However, we are a community that is open somewhat to development. So we would need sort of an opinion to be that, okay, there is some risk here. However, this is what you could absorb and this is what you couldn't. And here's where that is. Do you see where I'm going with this? Because and then if you asked a different solicitor, because they all have informed opinions that are professional, they would say, disregard that legal opinion. You could take mine because of blah, 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 blah. Right. And I've seen that as well. They're both qualified. They're both equal under law, but depending on who is asking the question or what questions, they would look at it and approach it completely different. So I just being mindful that we are a developing community with a housing crisis, and I'm not saying that it's blow up and bulldoze everything, but at the same time, it's finding that balance on being overly regulated to whatever you want to do and finding that in a way that protects the district interests. If that makes sense. Okay. Councillor Beddoes, you're up.
Yeah, Your Worship, I'm still a little confused. We've got a consultant's report. It's been filed to staff. Why can't we see it now, especially with dealing with the building permits, which is a very hot button item right now? And I would like it to educate myself in the process, because I'm always at a disadvantage relying on staff. Is there any reason why we couldn't see that consultant's report?
The intent would be for staff to first have the questions that we wish to pose to the consultant to be addressed by them before putting that forward to council. We would generally anticipate council would have those same questions that staff have. So before having that information out without a response back from the consultant, we want to try and address that ahead of the curve and then have that information available to council. A lot of this is based off of, as Mr. Blewett had mentioned, about those internal processes. So we want to make sure that both staff and the consultant have a clear understanding of what was analyzed and the recommendation arising from that. So then that way we can put that forward to council, and then you understand exactly what the next steps are moving forward with this review. So it's in that draft format before it's being finalized.
Follow up.
Yeah, I still don't see if the consultant's report is a report, and you know, it's not going to change from now until staff reviews it. Is what's the danger of us seeing it at the same time? I mean, it's just for information, and for me personally, so I can understand or possibly understand where some of the pitfalls are. So it's not with the idea that I'm going to go down and pound on staff's desk. That's not my job. But I just think we're paying for a lot of money for this report, and it's not going to change. Your report's a report. So I was wondering if I could see it.
Sure.
We'd all like to see it.
To the chair, yeah, certainly it's not being withheld by any means. We have a meeting with the consultant tomorrow to discuss some of the finer details of it. There are a number of recommendations within the report that will involve further consultation work from the same, not consultation work, but further work that this consultant can actually help us implement. So we wanted to have a meeting with that consultant to get into those details and find out what steps would be appropriate to follow, and then include that in our information package that we provide to council.
I think it's important to note that if that is the case, that council does receive the full version. And if there's recommendations that are outlined that staff feel they could not implement, I think it's reasonable that we be advised as to why you couldn't, right? But without seeing anything, we don't know, right? Counselor Bateman.
Yes, to you. So, yeah, thank you. I think we're all very hungry to learn more about this. It's been such an issue here in Souk, as you know, and we're just, so I see something compared in your report here on page 39, compared building permit fees and processing with several neighboring local governments like that. You know, I'm fascinated by that. I'm very curious, which local governments did you compare Souk processes to?
To the chair. So that is one of the items we'll be discussing with the consultant tomorrow. That was the last part of the building permit review. So her report did not include that comparison. It was one of the items that we realized that we should have included. So she has done analysis over the last 2 weeks, looking at Langford, Colwood, Central Saanich, a number of others, to see not only what their fees are, where they're located in bylaws, how they actually work it, and then how they process it. So basically, once again, using Tempest and opening the hood and seeing, are we following best practices for how we're even tracking and processing an application fee? So tomorrow we anticipate she'll be providing us with that. And then we'll ask her to provide that as an addendum to her report.
So as the mayor said earlier, Souk is unique, of course, but this UBCM grant program is being implemented in multiple jurisdictions. I found the regional district of Nanaimo, for example, really substantial KPMG report. Are you taking advantage of these documents as they arise to pull best practices from those documents?
To the chair. Yes. So I have reviewed the KPMG report that was done for the district of Saanich. They were not part of the grant program, but they provided a fulsome report for that district. I did review the one that was provided from Nanaimo. Grand Forks just recently contacted all of the jurisdictions that received this grant. So Delta, or Coquitlam, Grand Forks, and a number of other ones. They're putting together a user group, and we have just joined that as of this week. That's fresh. So we'll be having a meeting shortly and discussing where everyone's at with their particular processes, where they're at with their grant. And we'll be all sharing information.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to hear that, because there's so much duplication, and it's good to see collaboration here at that level. Finally, to the subdivision and development standards bylaw and this chain of processes. I'm not familiar with the Urban Development Institute. So I'm curious, and unfortunately my search for it here has not succeeded in giving me an answer. Tell me about that organization.
So the Urban Development Institute, which the District of Souk is a member of, is made up of a number of local governments, members of the development community, and they contribute to overall development and policy throughout the province, specifically being a member of the Capital Region. I spoke with the executive director a few weeks ago and just discussed the official community plan review process, this development approvals, and just how we could utilize the input from the development community a little bit better in a number of our processes. And the executive director mentioned that they have task forces and other community groups that participate and contribute feedback to municipalities, and suggested that this would be one opportunity that we could provide a document to them. They could have their membership take a look at it, specifically those involved in development, and then provide their feedback to us. We felt that was another good additional piece that they could contribute to our work. And then as well, just an ongoing relationship on how they, through either quarterly meetings or whatever monthly meetings that they want to set up, to understand more of what's going on in Souk, and then just talk about best practices as well. So utilizing our membership to the fullest.
Yes, okay.
So just an additional background for you, Councillor Bateman. When I was a counselor, they have luncheons every month. So usually there would be a guest speaker followed by lunch. You would pay a fee, whatever. So I used to attend the luncheons regularly. Sometimes elected officials would be presenting. Suk presented quite some time ago. I'm going back to 2010 when Suk was invited to present. Another time they did a tour of the West Shore and I was part of that tour that ended at Mariners Village at the time for a lunch. And it was just to showcase developments in the West Shore because a lot of it was very core centric at the time. Since being elected as mayor, though, the luncheons collide with the regional district board meetings. And I've been pushing the UDI to look at rescheduling that because most of the mayors are also on the board and it's impossible for us to get to one or the other without missing the board meeting. If you go onto the website, so that's still sort of there, it's UDI-capitalregion.ca. They were aware through myself and other mayors that are like, you know, you want us to be more involved. You need to speak our language a bit more and stop being so technical because we don't know what the heck you're talking about. So they've started doing pro forma type of training that is synthesized. Like I don't have time to take an 8-week course or the funds to take an 8-week course because it's not, but I'd like to understand when you hear terms like that, what it actually means. So they've been trying to provide it in a more to the elected officials' voice and speak our lingo a bit more. So they are doing a session for Vancouver Island elected officials, January 25th from 12 to 1 on Zoom. So you could join that. And then it just sort of gives you a sense, this is the reality now. Sometimes they talk about what the trends are in the local economy. So you do get a sense of what's happening around the region and the like. So it's quite informative in that way. So there is that available. And yeah, and I'll send this out to you when I get my dates to know sheet updated. And then there was an event recently. Some of us went to that together, didn't we? I can't remember now. Everything's kind of blurring together, but it was just okay. I think it was on housing or affordability. Yeah, and so again, as some of us did because we were able to attend, and then gave us some insight as to why that worked. And then I had just said back that, you know, it's all fine for this to present, but what would also help is a back and forth piece on why what you're saying may or may not work from an elected official's perspective. You can't just say that it's always our fault because in some cases the projects don't fit what we need in our community or they're not designed to meet our needs as well. So just wanted to give you that context on the EDI.
If that's okay. And that's in relation to Mr. Haldane's comments earlier. He will have the opportunity, or I'm sure you were taking some notes on what he was saying in the moment, at this draft to council developers and builders for review. So that's step 5, and that'll happen after April's receipt at the committee of the whole.
Yes, that's
Yes,
correct.
okay. That's great. Thank you.
Okay. I'll come back to you, Councillor Beddoes. Councillor St. Pierre, go ahead.
I'm interested in to the chair. I'm interested in finding out more about the actual the impact on smaller developers, really. So for example, Mr. Haldane was talking about, you know, the Section 514, people who want to build for family and so on and so forth. The process seems to be exhaustive and obviously needed for complex developments. I'm curious about how we can streamline developments for smaller developers and whether or not that's also being considered in all of this. In conversation with staff, I was happy to hear that it might be possible to use that as lower hanging fruit and maybe you know, make that happen a little more quickly so that we can actually provide relief and more affordable housing options. And I'm wondering how that's being considered in this process. Certainly in terms of things like the cost, if the cost of a permit is, or the process it's tripled, so it seems from pre-COVID to now, and indications are that a lot of that has to do with professional fees that may or may not be required if the district was to take on more risk, as I think our mayor has indicated. I'm wondering if that's being thoroughly addressed in this process and whether or not we could see some results in the near future.
Yes, it was noted earlier when discussing the solicitor review and the risks that are associated with undertaking different options. One of the things that staff have noted recently is the opportunity to have conversations with our consultants about something that is a high risk scenario versus a low risk scenario, and then trying to find what's the healthy in between option, and then through there having our solicitors review the levels of risk associated with those options as well. So we have a full review of that. One of the biggest things I think we're going to have to be mindful of is within the Local Government Act, what is an absolute requirement that staff will have to follow? And then what are those things that are discretionary? And one of the big items that come about is the delegated authority in the process. So if there's more flexibility for those pieces, the one thing that we often hear from applicants is this a delegated authority or is this something that goes to council? And if it is a delegated authority, traditionally that's viewed as a faster process. So how do we couple that with also all these other bylaw requirements that we have? And I think that goes along with what Mr. Carter said earlier about our subdivision and development standards bylaw. What are we asking developers to provide as part of the application process? And is there a scale of requirements based on the density of their developments? So that's all something that gets looked at through this consultant review. And then we'll provide the options based on the solicitor's input of, is council comfortable with this level of risk, or do we want to go with something that's a little bit safer on this side? And so council will have those options to consider through the bylaw adoption process.
So just to clarify, we could expect to have a number of options, some that would include ways of actually reducing costs for some of the smaller developers that you're looking at, providing housing for family and so on and so forth.
Ultimately, we're going to have what the discussion was through the engagement process, which I would believe those items would be flushed out, and then kind of a best practices recommendation that would come forward to council. So you'll see kind of that process that's been undertaken throughout this review process, and then ultimately what staff are putting forward as the recommended bylaw adoption, but to still understand there are these other options that were considered as well, should council wish to go in a different direction.
Two further questions. Another question with regards to building permits, specifically when we're not looking at subdivision at all, and whether or not it's a huge process. Is it also going to involve, for example, things like moving a door over or internal work that could be, handled by an engineer, basically renovations and such? I know that also takes up a lot of staff time. I'm curious as to whether or not this process will also be looking at how to streamline and facilitate those building permits.
Multiple scenarios. I don't know specifically that example, but we're looking at all of the aspects of the building permit review process to kind of streamline. What are the ones that don't require a lot of input because they're quite simplistic? There might be just a basic renovation as opposed to a large scale development that's going to impact the entire site, which would have other offsite impacts potentially. And whether a development permit was required as part of that process, covenants registered, et cetera.
Okay, I guess what I'm looking for is some indication that we might actually be creating different streams for different types of development. And I'm hoping that this could be considered, and I'm hoping it's within the various reports and work that's happening, because it seems clear that an internal renovation on a home is not going to require a survey. It's not going to require geotech and a lot of other things, and could potentially be very quickly taken care of and get that out of the queue. A subdivision of a single lot into two lots, again, far different from 125 lots in future subdivision, where we have to take a lot of care because the district is taking on a lot of risk in that particular situation. So I guess what I was hoping to find out, but I'm not actually clear, is are we actually separating these out so that we can actually have different processes to some degree for each one that takes the different levels of risk into account?
Yes, we'd like to streamline the process. So those ones that are simpler to go through can go into a specific stream versus the ones that are more complex, like a large scale multifamily development where it needs to have more eyes on it because of all the other civil design work that's associated with offsite works and design character anything that was required as part of the development permit and so forth. So yes, trying to split off those pieces so that the simpler ones are going through the process as quick as possible because they are identified as being a simple review.
Fantastic. I was hoping to hear that. Okay, last question. I was curious about the delegated authority. I assume that's delegated authority from council because most proponents don't want to come to council for obvious reasons, it takes longer, so on and so forth, and they don't know what we're going to do. I was curious about whether or not delegated authority from staff was also being considered. I know that there's departmental reviews that happen, and there are certain elements that seems to me that if it's well enough understood and if the issue is simple enough, some delegated authority could actually speed the process along. Is that also being considered?
I'm sorry, you might need to just repeat the last part, delegated authority from staff.
From staff. So for example, in any sort of development process at this point in time, we can see people checking it off. There's, almost every department head or some staff from each department is going to go through a particular application. Obviously, that's going to take a certain amount of time. It's possible it doesn't take anywhere near as much as I think. But it seems that in a simpler situation, there could be a delegated authority, or it could be that in this particular process, various pieces that could be delegated could be identified. Are the consultants also trying to identify pieces in the development process that could be delegated from other departments to speed the process along?
Yes, it's going through a process review. We want to make sure that all the necessary reviews that need to be undertaken are done so, and that if we can limit the amount of departments that are being involved, because perhaps these environmental interests aren't applicable in this file, then that doesn't have to go through that workflow. So it's the final objective is to simplify the process as much as possible, but make sure that we meet all the legislated requirements.
Wonderful. Sounds great. Thanks.
Okay. Councillor Pearson or Lajeunesse, do you have any questions? Go ahead, Councillor Pearson.
Thank you. I have a lot of questions and comments, and maybe I'll kind of try to simplify them. So building bylaw 404, or subdivision bylaw 404 is one of our most complex, but it's also our most involved in, probably the one that we need to be involved with the most, from my personal opinion. 404 is that complicated big monster in the corner that we always have to deal with. The report tonight kind of lends itself to feel like an operations kind of report. I'm always about milestones and metrics, and when these bylaws get created, milestones are important for me as a counselor. In my experience, is that because they get so immense by the time, and 404 is a huge, complicated document. So if we get milestones along the way, or updates or reports of what's been talked about, where we're at, I think it helps us kind of get to the point when, okay, well, we're comfortable. When we get to the end, we're forced to be wading through huge documents. And the committee of the whole, I really liked what you said tonight about it, because we get pushed into first and second reading sometimes, and we haven't had time to vet that entire document. So my comment is, I'd like to see more milestone updates of where the progress has been, where those discussions have taken place, what's been decided, what are the best practices. The second part that I always talk about for me personally is metrics. So if we're engaging on just because we got $434,000 or $494,000 or whatever it is, the number, I'd like to see metrics associated with before and after. So if we're improving something, kind of like to know where we're at now. And I'd like to have a sense that, if we're adopting, new processes, procedures, and bylaws, that they're improving the current state. So I didn't get the sense that there's metrics associated with this recommendation in 404. Again, this 404 is housed and held in planning and file management, big piece of this. Yet the report tonight sort of gave me the sense it's operations driven. Now, of course, I'm a little distracted tonight, and I apologize for that. But I would like to see myself woven into this milestone reports on things. That's just a comment for now. So.
Okay. Any response from staff there?
Yeah, to your worship, just a clarification, like operations side of this, and Matthew could speak to the planning side of it. 90% of the stuff within subdivision 404 bylaw is technical and it's engineering related. In terms of milestones, this is sort of to get council's general consensus on the process of this strategy. The involvement Councillor Pearson's looking for will come at the stage of sort of 3-4. When the bylaw is presented to council at the committee level, they can start going through it, and it will be separated into its individual sections for ease of review. And at that time, we'll be going through sort of with council when it's provided at committee of the whole, what does the public consultation step look like, and what do the milestones look like? Where is this for time frame for the consultation, for the development community, the public consultation, and then when we would be looking to get through that to go into like a third-party civil review. So it will all come. There's a lot of moving pieces in it. So we just wanted to initiate this to go forward with sort of updating council that we're doing the internal staff review right now. We will get it looked at by the different professional categories, geotech, civil, electrical, and then that's the stage that we'll bring it to the committee of the whole, present it to council, finalize kind of this strategy, input milestones and timeframes to it.
Okay, yeah, and I appreciate that answer. And it gives me comfort that it's being in the background. And the second part of this is that's important for me is that interconnectedness through the departments, because this is woven into just about everything that we do. So it's kind of really important for us to make sure that because we're going to be the ones that field those questions and comments. And I get, we have a bright staff to take care of the technical and the technical, but that political side that comes up, right, is an irritant. And if we do a good job of this, hopefully it streamlines everything. So, because, we have challenges within our district right now. So.
Councillor Lajeunesse?
Yeah, I guess one of the questions was the same as Councillor Pearson, is metrics, like where are we at and where are we going? So I like to see some improvement from where we're at and what are we aiming for. And the other thing is just like we have $500,000 here to work with, and I would like to see some of the budgets associated with these steps along the way. I recognize that consultants don't come cheap. Where's the money going? Where are we at in the process? What's left? And the other thing, on one of the earlier slides, it mentioned the DCC review, which, if I remember correctly, that was done prior to this process as a different process. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, to counter to the chair. In terms of sorry, can you repeat the last question, the last part of the question again? I was thinking about the first part.
The DCC review, and was that not a separate process that we went through last year with Urban Systems? I think it was.
Correct. So the DC, yeah, to the chair, the DCC program was completed last year. The bylaw was adopted, or sorry, at the earlier part of this year, and the bylaw was adopted by council in June this year. Developing an implementation manual. DCC programs are absolutely complex. It takes a significant amount of staff time to implement them properly in relation to where credits would be applicable when a developer is doing frontage improvements on a corridor that has a DCC project associated with it. How are those credits applied? How are they applied consistently? So it was about the stuff that was completed under this program was developing a website brochure that simplifies the rules of engagement for the program, conveys those to the developers. This program also created an implementation manual that is used by staff so that the training is consistent assistant and any staff responsible for calculating DCCs, applying credits, looking at the DCC projects that came out of the council's TMP and PTMP are all applied properly. So it was about developing the implementation manual under this program, as well as a website brochure for consistently applying credits, calculating the DCCs and conveying that information back to the developers, which also streamlines the process.
Over to Councillor Beddoes, then back to St. Pierre.
Yes, your worship, I've been frustrated with the permit process for over 4 years now. And I see here the consultant report identifies several recommendations to improve the building permit application process, which is currently under review. I'd like to see those recommendations. Why me as a councillor cannot see those recommendations? And the second is, again, to your worship, is with those recommendations, we're all taking a lot of fire right now with the building permits and the lengthy times. And we just got some fairly recently. If these recommendations are half decent, when will they be implemented? What sort of time frame are we looking here for some relief? Because I've been working with this for 4 years that I've been involved in it. And I thought it was getting better, but it doesn't seem to be. So if there is some recommendations, A, I'd like to see them. And second is I'd like a timeline so we can get some relief in this building process, permit process. We're going to see some improvement. We've got $500,000 we're spending. Surely we can do something now rather than wait for 6 months in the latter part of 2023. Is that a valid question?
Councillor Beddoes, I think, is expressing frustration that all of council is enduring right now. So it would be helpful to get a response to that, please.
To the chair, we'll be meeting with the consultant tomorrow to finalize some of the details of that report and having her add the piece about the comparison with building permit fees and processes with our neighboring local governments. And then that report will be available.
But to follow up on Councillor Beddoes' question, though, is should there be recommendations that can be dealt with? Do we have to wait until this comes forward, or is there other things that you could just do internally? Because he's absolutely correct in saying that the process is really broken right now, or at least that is our perception of it because of what we're enduring, and it hasn't improved. In my view, it's worsened. So I don't know why that happened, or where it went. Is it just like, what is it? Because we're sitting here trying to understand the problem statement and we don't know what that is, except that it seems like a big mess. So is it the case where if we can do X, will that be done? Or do we have to wait until this draft comes? In which case it would be disappointing, I think, for us if we found out that there were some earlier things that could have just been dealt with. Like, do you have to wait for us?
So I think one of the big things we have to remember is there's a number of staff that are involved in the process. And when a development permit is issued, the planner is the file manager, and they're making sure that everything that is a condition of that development permit and everything that was accepted as a schedule to that development permit is adhered to and followed through the building permit process. So while building official can review and ensure that code is compliant with the application that's been submitted, there are a number of zoning bylaw, official community plan requirements, and other development permit conditions that need to be satisfied before a permit can be issued, or even occupancy at the end of the application process. So when the planning and development department is depleted of all planning staff to be able to provide those resources to review it, we end up having a bit of a backlog where we cannot process in a timely manner, and to provide that customer service that we strive to provide. So that creates frustrations, that creates an issue where we can't deliver service in a timely fashion, and we have to build back out of that backlog. And we're slowly doing that. We brought on a planner after 6 months of not having any in-house planners on board in October. We're bringing on a senior planning technician in January next month. So we're slowly working towards that, but there's also other file components that are being looked at, other staff requirements that are needed. And so they all pile up and it becomes an entire challenge to dig out of. And so these recommendations that are being provided by the consultant are going to be items that we can implement initially. Once I get to have that conversation, I've not been provided with that opportunity yet to sit down with the consultant and to go over the report. It's been provided to me for an initial review. So I get to discuss this, get a better understanding of what they observed through this process and make sure the necessary details for the planning department to implement those recommendations can be accomplished immediately, and those ones that have to come further down the road because it's all part of a much larger review process can be achieved at that time. So simple things like making sure staff have the necessary training, we can make sure that that's a recommendation. We'll get on that and see how quickly we can provide it. If there's large scale IT pieces that need reprogramming within our database, we'll work with our IT department to see how long that's going to take. But I need that time to sit down with the consultant and understand what these recommendations are specifically detailing for us to initiate in the short term and the long term.
Councillor Beddoes?
Yeah, I'm still at a loss as to the chair is I mean, there's a report filed, right? I mean, if it's in a language I don't understand, well, then I won't understand it, but there's several recommendations to improve the building permit application. And I think it would be to my advantage to know what those are. So when it comes up in the future, if you refer to one of these recommendations and it says that you need to have more funding for this or that, I can better understand it and I can better deal with it. But to me, it's just frustrating again. A consultant report identifies several recommendations. Why can't I see those recommendations?
Mr. Schaefer?
And your worship, what I think I've heard from staff is that having sat down with a consultant and reviewed the recommendations so that we understand them as clearly as the consultant does, we're going to make that report available to council. And the recommendations that the consultant has made, if they're doable in the short term, then we're going to implement them. If they're longer, more complicated ones that require us to go deeper into the processes and dig farther down into the rabbit hole of the subdivision control bylaw, that will take more time. But I think to Councillor Beddoes' question, if we have the recommendations in front of us and or if we have the report in front of us, having had staff had the opportunity to clarify with the consultant what it is that is contained in those recommendations, I think that's a necessary step before we provide that to council, because otherwise we're giving you a document that we're not clear on. And I just think that I don't know what the time frame is for that review. I would suggest it will be sooner rather than later, because this is important and obviously council places a great deal of importance on it. We've clearly heard that tonight. There's a meeting scheduled tomorrow with the consultant, and following that meeting, I will consult with the planning staff and the operations staff and find out what a reasonable time frame is to get that to you all, so that you can be aware of what's in the report and what the recommendations are.
You follow?
Yeah, I could be okay with that explanation, providing something is coming fairly soon. I'm sure the staff would like to have a look at those recommendations. I understand that. It's still not going to change. Those recommendations are still going to be in the same form, but at least they'll be able to comment on that as long as it's in a timely manner. I don't want to be sitting here 6 months from now wondering what those recommendations are, especially if there's something that can be implemented, because this is at a crisis stage. Like I say, 4 years I've been dealing with it, and I'm not a planner, a layperson when it comes to that. So I need to get some ideas from the professionals, one of which you hired for a great deal of money, and they've got some recommendations. So if you need some time to review them, that's fine, but sooner than later is very, very important. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor St. Pierre? Oh, I see there's just a hand up from Ms. Gray. Go ahead, please.
Sorry, just wanted to add some clarity just around the budget piece. I know it's not quite as specific as the one consultant report that we received, but council may have gotten this budget when it was submitted for council's consideration to approve the district applying for the grant. So the total of $494,000 was submitted. So we have to submit a budget for certain aspects that this funds will be spent on. So just to provide this context, again, it's not specific to Councillor Beto's questions exactly, but $70,000 was submitted for Tempest online building permit application integration. So this would be the online modules like e-apply, e-commerce, My City. There's a software cost component of that that needs to be paid. So that was grant eligible. So that's been supplied, and included in that is money for staff training on how to use those modules and rolling them out. From that aspect, $130,000 was the budget provided for the subdivision and development process review and guideline establishment. $20,000 was the Tempest assessment and consultation for subdivision and development approval process and integration. And this is Tempest consultation with led by departmental staff. And the last two significant portions of this would be $118,000 for the Tempest subdivision and development electronic plan review module integration. And for the consultant piece, there was $156,000 requested. Just for clarity, this one report that's being discussed in further detail right now, all of those funds were not allocated just for that one consultant. There's been other consultants involved in this project, a grant application previously with Bylaw 404. There was a consultant involved in this. There's a consultant that's been involved in this building permit process, and there'll be further consultants that will be paid out of that budget as this grant progresses. Just wanted to provide that bit of context.
Okay, thank you. Councillor St. Pierre.
This comes a little bit late because I was hoping to follow Councillor Jeunesse with his question to Mr. Carter. I wanted to make sure that I understood Mr. Carter's answer. If I understand correctly, what's happening is the DCC document itself, which is already done and been completed, is extremely complex. It's just a complex piece of work. And that the process we're undertaking right now is to make sure that staff has sufficient training in the process of using this information or this regulation is clear enough that there won't be any issues for developers in terms of moving forward in a streamlined manner. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Schaefer.
And just to clarify my comments earlier on, your worship, it's a draft, this report that we received is a draft report. If recommendations aren't technically or logistically feasible within our internal processes, they might change to reflect what we're able to do. But if those changes do get made, then we'll tell you why. So we do have a draft report in front of us. It's not the final report. It is a draft report. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, Councillor Lajeunesse.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that I think the main reason for the frustration of council is that we do have people coming to us continuously complaining about the process and asking us what the hell's going on there. Why can't we get this done? And we don't have an answer for them, and it puts us in a really tough spot because we do feel that we should have an idea what the hiccups are, and it would be nice just to say something other than, I don't know.
So just some final comments and then we'll get to the motion here. Or Councillor Bateman, did you want to ask something?
I have no questions.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm that. Okay, we're aware of the capacity and how busy it is. I just want to actually defend this council and the previous one in that we recognize that we haven't cut back anywhere. We've supported the decisions. We've supported the expansions. We've supported the training. I don't recall us ever saying that you need to scale back. We endured that, the tax increases that went through as best as we could. And we wanted to promote a healthy and safe culture, not only here in Chambers, but in the workplace below. So I hear you when you say that there is capacity. I don't think any one of us expected that with COVID, it would just get so freaking busy out here. but that's what happened in the flight from urban to rural. And it's not just Souk across Canada, it's anywhere that is, you know, beautiful to live, has fiber optics, has good cell coverage, proximity to an airport. Those rural communities that don't have those didn't, while they had some growth, it wasn't permanent. Now that we have those things, this is a natural draw. Souk for a long time was also promoting itself to the world through tourism. And as we know, when folks visit nice places, there's a desire to also live in those places. And that created that opportunity to migrate out west. So we hear you. I also want to defend the decisions of council as well, that we've done everything we could. I don't know what else we can do in terms of supporting staff. I mean, obviously that'll come through the budget deliberations, but at no point did we say, please scale down or cut back. As far as I'm aware, if we did, it's because maybe we didn't understand or needed more information or something, because while you did last year suggest when we got our wish list and a tax hike was going to be 17%, I'm sure you understand why we could not have pushed that through. Right? We knew that was the dream list. There's no way we could have supported that. That's not a reasonable one. And I think it's understandable. And yeah, so we've done those pieces. Maybe there's more work that could be done, in which case we expect you to share that with us through the right and appropriate avenues. In other cases, I think, as you know, council does read everything that you put in front of us. And if we have a loose end, we're going to ask, which is why several have picked up. So in that case, I'm not going to say don't put it in the report, but because I appreciate the transparency, but just note that we will be following up and asking those because it's in the report and now we're all curious naturally. But I think if you find some wins that are deliverable, we don't want to wait into the operations of the district. If you see ways of improvement, I recommend that you do that and then share with us what you found through that report and what you feel would work. We do often hear though that you know, that there's a collision with the bylaws, and we respect the fact that staff is upholding the bylaws and policies that are adopted by council, whether this one or previous ones, whatever, it's council collective of all time. However, we in the last term adopted many new policies and bylaws. So if those had implications that are now coming to light, we need to understand what they are so that we are aware of the impact. And I think that's why we're getting so many, because we adopted bylaws, we weren't aware, and now we're seeing that those are creating harm, or at least that is what is being communicated back to us. In that case, we're looking at it going, I don't know how to maybe, and that's where in my inaugural, I said we may have inadvertently added red tape to the process. And in which case we need to identify it and see if it's reasonable and eliminate it if it's redundant. So that's sort of where that's going. Back when this approval grant came about, it came about through the UBCM. There was a change in the provincial government. At that time, the Liberal government, the prevailing government at the time, was saying that local government is holding up the supply. Local government's holding up the supply. And we pushed back saying, no, that's actually not true, given not just in Souk, but in elsewhere. The developers have a role to play in this as well. It's not just the local government. So we pushed back. That advocacy is what led the ministry creating this process for us, that we need help. We struggle with capacity and the ability to deliver. We know that there's a housing crisis. We did the needs analysis, but it's through that advocacy. So I think in that case, that's advocacy from the elected officials through the UBCM, which is member driven, but it represents elected officials. So that's why I think we feel like we have some of this, because this is a result of our work that we were doing. And we want to be a part of it, not to be a nuisance, but because we want to see the outcome of that advocacy work and proving the point that it isn't just local government holding up the supply. The developers have an equal role to play in this as well. We all have our part to play in this. What is concerning to me, though, is having been in Ottawa recently, is a particular party now is saying that, quite aggressively was stating that local governments need to eliminate all the red tape. You need shovels in the ground. And we may tie up your infrastructure funding or our need for the former gas tax community works fund if you don't do what we say. And we will find ways to go over you, or we'll have even the province go over you and make those decisions for you if you're not doing your part. So naturally I had to pick a fight. Because that, and I pushed back because our infrastructure is lagging, because the federal government has not responded to the needs of our community and has left us straggling. So I had a really hard time sitting still on that. I went to question period twice, got really annoyed by not only the poor behavior in the House, just really dumbass comments. I couldn't believe it from people that are representing their constituency. It was just appalling behavior. But also there were some standing up for local governments only to be sort of hammered down by others. So it just concerns me as the federal government moves into budget. The Liberal government and particularly the NDP recognized us more. We're going to do this together. There was more togetherness as opposed to do what we say. So it's concerning just in terms of what you're hearing from Ottawa. And certainly those of us were at Rising Economy, and I won't use the profanity that I did use then, is just the federal government really doesn't understand the work of local government here on the ground. And they don't, because I don't think they could say such things like that if we were truly in this together. So I just wanted to put that context. It's where I was the last week, and it's sort of that these are the dollars we're desperately trying to get for our community, and we all have our part in this. So that's why we're following this so closely. It's the advocacy work. We also know that we have locals here that desperately need the work. We don't want to see our trades driving elsewhere out of the community to find work, that when there's work available close to home. Of course, we want to manage risk accordingly, but we also want to see local employment and people delivering close to home while getting the necessary and the housing that we desperately need onto the market. So go ahead.
To the chair, it may be beneficial to know that as we're wrapping up 2022, that we had 156 new lots created this year. That's not including the phase stratas with multifamily. In 2021, we had 62 new lots. So we've had a significant increase in this year.
So these are good news stories, right? So I think it's important that you showcase this work, because we can get caught up in the cup of negativity, right? We don't want to do that because we all have our part in this. You're clearly delivering that. We didn't know that. That's good news, I think. And it's something to be proud of. And we recognize too that many of you are new. We were certainly stuck in Zoom boxes for a long time and didn't, we got along reasonably well in the Zoom boxes. Not that hard to do when you figure out the mute button. But we also know that many of you joined us in that time when it was just really weird to get to know. I didn't even know if I could give Ms. Hooper a proper handshake, because it's just all kind of weird now. So it's just the piece of the pandemic and the struggle, and those that are impacted and some that weren't, and who chimes in and who doesn't, and managing all of expectations. And that's where I say to my more urban peers that when their residents move out this way, that they need to recognize that they're in soup now and they can keep that urban living where they came from, or maybe they should move back to it. Not to pick on any one particular community in particular, but things are a little bit different at the end of Highway 14, and we're doing the best we can. So we recognize we have our part as the elected body. We're going to keep advocating certainly for those dollars and for fairness across and our place in the world of government. And we also will hold you to do your very best as you are in your professional capacity, which we are happy to have you do. So I know that it's just all a bit messy because we've come out of Zoom boxes into human form, and the world is changing dramatically. But we also recognize that it's tough. 7% interest rates hike this year, and potentially more to come. And we really want to keep our residents in good form. So we're all working towards the same thing, but it's good news. And Should be happy. We're proud of you for that. Counselor St. Pierre, then Bateman, and then I'll put the motion forward.
I was going to put the motion forward.
Well then, so I think we can do these together, right? Sure. So that council received the report regarding a status update for the development approvals project for information, and two, and that council directs staff to proceed with the next steps forward for the new draft subdivision and development standards bylaw review process. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Bateman. Would you like to comment on that further?
Quickly. Thank you so much for your work. Really looking forward to seeing the further reports and better streamlined process. Thanks.
Councillor Bateman?
Wondering if I could make an amendment to this motion?
You can
And
try it.
Add a third clause, and that would be that council directs staff to report back on the process of the development approvals grant update at a meeting in early February, perhaps, as a
Okay.
midpoint between when
Hey, don't
council-
motivate, just stop with the motion so we can capture it properly on the screen. Councillor
Just capturing the milestones and metrics comment of Councillor Pearson, I think is.
Yeah, so let's just see it on the screen so we know that it captures that appropriately. The councillor directs staff to report back on the development approval grant update at a February regular council meeting. 2022,
3.
February 2023. Okay, so Councillor Bateman is moving that amendment. Do I have a seconder for the amendment? Seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Anything to motivate on the amendment? Pretty self-explanatory. So I'll call the question on the amendment, please. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. So now on the main motion as amended. So that includes all three parts. Any comments now on the amended motion? Nope.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to note that, these issues are common across the country. It's important to keep the context alive here. And that here in Souk, for over a decade now, this has been a front and center issue. And various councils and municipal staff have attempted to wrestle it into workable shape. And here we are in 2022. There is this new era of funding to allow process to happen. I'm looking at the Nanaimo report, their recommendations. They want an efficient, expedient, clear, predictable, service-oriented, and aligned process. And they note the challenges which are common in so many municipalities: staffing shortages at local government, incomplete applications, lack of information and poor communications, provincial referral delays, since these organizations themselves are chronically understaffed and slow, and updated technology. So it sounds like, and thank you to staff for all the work you've done on this to date. It's just clear from the conversation tonight, we need to learn more. And I'm sure in our orientation in the new year, we will have opportunities to keep discovering. And so thank you. That's it.
Excellent. Okay, I'll call the question then. All those in favor, please. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much, everyone. So there's been a request for a health break. So if we coordinate our time, it's 9:12. I'll see you at 9:20, 8 minutes. All right, 9:20. Thank you. Okay, everyone, we're hitting 9:21. If all humans could find their appropriate seat, not to single anyone out, certain Counselor Dana Lajeunesse. Okay. Thank you for those viewing online for that break there. We'll move on into the agenda into 10.3. Asset Management Program and Financial Strategy Update.
Thank you, Your Worship. To your worship, we're providing a high level update tonight on sort of the end game of the asset management program. So the district has probably one of the best that we've been compliment on it, and my compliments to the GIS department over the years. We have probably one of the best asset management inventories around for small to medium municipalities. They've done an excellent job with making sure the inventories are up to date. All new development infrastructure goes into our database. It's honestly absolutely phenomenal. So earlier this year, we were successful in a grant to receive, to go forward with doing the financial strategy. It's sort of the last component of your asset management program. So we received the grant early 2022. We engaged Urban Systems to deliver the program in unison with staff. This report's gonna give a high level review of the financial implications. We're not looking for any, just for council to receive the report for information. We're in the process right now of finalizing this program and coming up with a draft asset management policy. Going forward into 2023, probably around March, April, we're going to deliver the full-blown program to council. It will come with a comprehensive presentation by Urban Systems as well as myself. And there will be recommendations for council to consider at that time. What this presentation is doing tonight, it's just really demonstrating what the financial implications are that are associated with putting forward a financial strategy, which will basically deal with asset replacement of every asset that the district owns. So cost implications will be reviewed. And like I said, the final report will be coming forward in 2023 for council's consideration. So the program deliverables we've completed so far to date are basically, we've engaged Urban, we've incorporated climate action impacts into the district's asset management program. That's included like service life and consequences of failure. We've reviewed and incorporated natural assets into the database. A lot of them are already there. We've just refined them a little bit. And we refined our asset inventory in terms of the design life, service life, which is basically your design life expectancy of all assets that are in place with the district, as well as their conditional assessments to refine how they looked. We've identified replacement costs and schedules for all the district's assets, developed annual funding targets, and we've reviewed district revenues, the funding gaps, and we're putting forward sort of financial strategies for council's consideration in 2023. We've also developed, we're in process of finalizing the last piece right now, which is developing a draft asset management policy and framework, which is in alignment with the financial strategy. So big picture of the district's assets. All the asset funding categories were analyzed, and out of that, we've developed two general asset funds. There's an asset management general fund, which is including all the fleet, all facilities, roads, sidewalks, bridges, parks, stormwater. So that's all your district's assets. Right now, the total replacement costs on all the district assets when they come to their service life expectancy or whatever their design life essentially is about $257 million. With the sewer, the second one is the sewer fund. It specifically has to be funded through wastewater service fees, whereas the asset management general fund would have to be financed through taxation. The wastewater fund has a total asset replacement of $96 million. The first chart we're going to look at here is, this demonstrates basically what it's referred to as is the AALCI, so your average annual life cycle investment. So there's three different scenarios that are proposed here in the graphs in front of council. First one being is, what annually do you need to be bringing in to replace all the assets within the district? So in the first category, for the general fund, for all the district's assets, the district needs to be bringing in about $6 million to have enough money. So they're continuously replacing assets as they hit their life expectancy. What the second scenario is showing is what annual investment targets does the district have to have coming in and be able to budget for if you're going to accept a little bit more risk and say that the assets are going to fail essentially 25% past their design life, past their expected service life. What the third scenario shows here is the annual investment that needs to be basically brought in financially to replace all the assets if you're going to push assets 50% past their expected service life. So less of an annual sort of monetary value that has to be coming in, but you're accepting a greater risk. Will those assets actually make it to 50% past their design expected life? Typically, the higher risk you go, the less money you need to bring in annually. For the purpose of this report, we're going to look at the second scenario here when we go into the financial strategies. So the financial strategy recommendations within here that will be presented to council in 2023. Right now, they're going to be based off the 25% greater. So not budgeting for when assets design life occurs, because sometimes assets will actually last longer than expected design life. So we're going to look at the second scenario today, which is basically 25% past or greater than asset service life. So the first one we're going to look at here is the general fund. So within the general fund, the three horizontal lines you see on the graph, the middle one is scenario 2. So with scenario 2, there's sort of 3 financial strategies that can be considered within that to get your annual life cycle investment that needs to be brought in. Basically, if a 1.75% tax increase annually was put in place, you would achieve your annual investment by about 2050. If a 2% tax increase was put in place, an annual investment would be achieved by 2047. And if a 2.25% annual tax increase was put in place, you would hit your annual investment targets by 2024. A middle ground would be recommended on that. So what it would look like is for every single asset within the district, so that council and the district could replace the assets as they became, or as they failed, or 25% past their service life, it would require a 2% tax increase annually every year until 2047. That's for the general fund. And like I said, this is just, I wanted to provide council with a high level overview on the finances so council can have the information, think about this stuff, and basically the full report will come to council and will be presented in 2023. But this is sort of a preempt just so you're aware of what the financial implications are and have this material for reference. So that takes care of the general fund, which is the majority of the district's assets. If you start looking at the sewer fund to reach that annual or average annual life cycle investment, it's a little bit different because it's not funded through taxation. It's going to be funded through sewer fees. So typically you wouldn't want to increase sewer fees every single year. So to achieve these annual investment goals, what we looked at is basically incremental increases in sewer fees over a set period of time, and doing that every 5 years. So sewer fees weren't increased every year, but they had to be increased every 5 years. So again, this is based on the information I'm providing and presenting in this report. At the end of it will be based on 25% past the extended service life, which is very realistic. It's not a huge risk like expecting 50% past the life. And again, that's the middle line on the graph. So there's 2 financial scenarios here or there's 3 on the graph. The lowest percent increase, which would be the 15% one, which is the one shown in gray, doesn't actually achieve replacing the assets before they would fail at that 25% design life. So we're going to look at the 2 options here presented, which are basically if a 20% increase was put forward for sewer fees every 5 years, you would hit this annual investment target for replacing your wastewater infrastructure assets by 2048. If you put forward a 25% increase in the sewer fees every 5 years, you would hit this annual investment target by 2043. It would be recommended on the middle ground, which would be the 20% one. The 15% increase would not achieve it. 25% is a little bit extreme. The 20% is kind of a middle ground. So again, there's a lot of information here. Wanted really council to have this information just to digest it. So when we bring forward the whole report in 2023, you've had some time to take a look at this stuff. End results on this are basically what I've just been explaining. So with the asset management general fund, there's an infrastructure deficit of almost $260 million. Going forward, to hit the replacement values for your average annual life cycle investment, if a 2% tax increase was put forward annually, you'd have to do that for 24 years to hit the target of bringing in $4.88 million, which would be sufficient to replace all district assets at the time of failure, 25% past their extended life. With the sewer fund, it would be a 20% increase in sewer fees every 5 years to hit an annual average investment of $950,000 by 2048. Recommendation in front of council tonight is to receive the financial strategy update for information. Again, I just wanted council to have this information. So when we bring forward the report in 23, there's not as much of a shock on it, and council's had time to look at the graphs. And if there's any questions, more than happy to answer them now or at any time after this meeting.
Okay, thank you. Councillor St. Pierre.
I have two questions. One has to do with the sewer fees. Sewer fees from what I understand, pay for ongoing costs of maintenance and operations for the waste treatment plant, so on and so forth. They also pay, I believe, they need to be corrected if I'm wrong, for whatever outstanding debt we might owe in terms of actually putting the original infrastructure. Given that particular piece, I was curious as to whether or not once the actual debt is paid off, does that still require the increases in the same way, or is there some formula we use to actually scale back the fees once the debt is paid off? So that's the first question.
So to the chair, it's fairly complex, and I'm going to be reporting to council on this in 2023. It's one of the programs we're working with Urban Systems right now in relation to the sewer bylaw, the existing SSA, potential expansions to the SSA, because we're under about a $33 million project grant application with the federal and provincial government right now for potential expansions to Kaltassin and Whiffen Spit area. So we're analyzing this whole thing collectively. It's very complex. I'll try and answer it as best I can. But right now, sewer fees are being paid for basically paying back the loan for putting back the existing infrastructure, as well as the cost of operation and maintenance. So you have operation and maintenance and paying back the debt for the initial sewer infrastructure that's going in. And what we're looking at right now is potentially unwinding that going towards 2026 when that loan payment gets expired, and there might be the potential incorporation of a service area with Kaltassin and or with Whiffen Spit. So what typically happens is a parcel tax is established. So a parcel tax would get established, which would basically cover the cost of infrastructure going in. So that would be separate from the O&M and operation and maintenance of the system. Right now it's combined for the existing SSA. So we're looking at pulling those two pieces apart so that the operation and maintenance can be analyzed, and the existing service area, once that debt's paid off, we can look at what the fee implications would look like following that debt payment being realized. Going forward with the operation and maintenance, what's not incorporated into the sewer fees right now is the asset management replacement. But collectively, we're working with Urban Systems so that we can look at sort of unwinding the existing SSA bylaw right now, so we can look forward at sort of uniform costs for operation, maintenance, and asset management that would be applied to the existing service area, and it would be the same O&M and asset management that would be applied to basically Kaltassin or Whiffen Spit if they are incorporated. However, the existing sewer area would have a parcel tax that would be realized by 2026, and the Kaltassin and Whiffen Spit would have a parcel tax that wouldn't be realized until 20 years following the implementation of that infrastructure. Again, it's very complex. I will have a full report and presentation to council on this through 2023.
Thank you. My second question. My second question has to do with natural assets. I was wondering what type of natural assets were included on what basis and what that looks like in terms of life cycle and so on.
Ms. Hooper could add to this. In terms of the natural assets, you're looking at a lot of like sort of natural stormwater detention, stuff like that, forested areas. And it's more a lot in the program, and it'll be presented by Urban Systems. It's more about the management of your natural assets as opposed to the replacement, because natural assets, if they're managed correctly, they don't typically need to be replaced like physical assets. Ms. Hooper, did you have any? Good. So that's essentially answering your question. I hope, Mr.
Thank you.
Councilor Xavier.
Councillor Pearson.
Yes, Chair. The question that my memory kind of gets a little bit faded, but I think that the sewer to build the complete sewer was somewhere around what, 14 million or something like the first time we did it, or something somewhere like that.
17, I think.
Yeah, there was some kind of that. So how is the total asset replacement? Is that inflation that would put it to 96 million? That just seems like a huge amount of money to me compared to what we actually have.
To the chair. So yes, if it was, and Ms. Gray can comment if on the actual numbers for the initial cost of the sewer. But yes, with inflation, with expansions we've done to the plant, the life cycle of the plant and all the wastewater infrastructure, you're looking at inflation over basically a 50-year cycle. So yes, it would get upwards around $96 million.
So the 96 million is the projected cost at the end of its life cycle.
That's correct.
Okay. So second question. So the asset management, so in asset management and hard physical assets, is there a preventative maintenance program that increases the life, or is that also factored into the asset management, preventative maintenance?
Preventative maintenance is factored in, depending on what levels you're doing it on for different assets. Different assets are going to have different levels of preventative maintenance, whether you're discussing roads and crack sealing, or you're talking regular maintenance that's conducted on the vehicle. All that stuff will be included within the final presentation in 2023, but it is incorporated into all these costs.
Thank you.
Other questions from members of council? Go ahead, Councillor Bateman.
So to you, the question is, okay, so there's a 2% tax increase for this general fund in 2024. I believe you're recommending this begin. So that 2% equaling approximately $200,000 would go into a reserve fund. Is that right?
To the chair, yeah. So if 2% annually was collected, $200,000 would start coming in the first year. The second year, another 200 coming in, totaling 400,000, and so on. That would be collective all the way up to 2047. It would go into a reserve fund, and I will allude to this later in my operations update presentation, but it is essential for replacing all the assets, but it also presents opportunities. We're strategically designing all the TMP projects. When these TMP projects are completed, not only are you putting in some new infrastructure, there's a lot of existing infrastructure that's basically being replaced at the same time in terms of pavement structure, in terms of storm infrastructure. So where this lies as a benefit is by establishing an asset management fund like this, you're being sustainable, you're budgeting to appropriately replace all your assets, but you're also establishing a fund that can be used to offset and leverage large grant opportunities, or basically take out a loan if those grant opportunities aren't there to fund these projects. If we go after, say, major projects, the Phillips Corridor redo, Charters Corridor redo, if we don't have the funds to basically put in our share of the grant monies, this fund can be used for that, because essentially through a project, we're replacing existing assets as well. So it's also providing funding to leverage and offset other major opportunities to implement some of these council plans.
Yeah, thank you. So I think last time, a year ago at budget time, we did set up a reserve fund to have funding available for grant applications. So how much did that come in at? Do you recall? It was 3% or 2%?
Miss Gray could allude to it. I believe it was a 2% tax increase. Prior to finalizing the asset management program, I was working with Miss Gray on that, saying basically it would be really good over a few year period to establish a 2% increase collectively for 3 to 4 years. And I've spoke to council about this previously as well by saying, if we basically establish a 2% for 4 years, that brings in $800,000. If we needed to at some point and we were not successful with a major grant opportunity and council wished to go forward with implementing some major corridors and they were of the upset of costs of $20 million, that 8% tax increase, 2% over 4 years, bringing in $800,000 would facilitate giving council the option to take out a loan and pay back that loan with that $800,000 that was coming in annually. So yes, it does replace assets and provides good opportunity to go forward with some of the TMP projects with or without grant opportunities.
Okay. Two more questions. First is how did this is the act of a mature municipality looking ahead to ensure functionality of our key assets. How did we handle this previously? Was it pretty random?
Sorry,
asset replacement. If something broke down, we replace it.
It's reactionary. So
Reactionary.
Annually, budgets are brought forward to council. Very high budgets, alluded to a 17% being brought forward initially last year. With one of these funds in place, we're hoping that we could see those budgets being brought forward, being more realistic. We're not being reactionary on replacements. It comes up. Reactionary replacements are not always good. If there's a section of road that fails, we're not budgeting to replace the whole road. We're being reactionary and we're going and replacing a small section. If we're being reactionary and going and replacing a small section of culvert, we're sometimes just fixing isolated spots. We're spending more money than we would be if we were actually budgeting for it in the long term through an asset management reserve. What would allow us to have the funds to do larger projects, more collective projects that we're addressing everything at once, as opposed to small little emergency items that are costing a lot more.
Okay. Good answers, Mr. Carter. I'm curious finally about a line here. Failing and failed infrastructure currently needs to be addressed. Can you, that's under reference to prior to the district, incorporating all infrastructure was built to rural standards. So can you give me some examples of our current failed and failing infrastructure?
Charters Road.
Charters Road, there's a classic.
Charters Road is one. And it was identified a while ago and we did look for emergency funding from the province for that. But because we proactively have not been putting asset management funds away or specific reserves to address that problem specifically, we were not successful in receiving funds. Another great example of failed assets in the district is pretty much, I would say 60-70% of your storm infrastructure.
Right.
It is failed. It is a problem. There's a lot of development going on in Sooke and we have to put a lot of infrastructure requirements onto the developers, but it's also challenging for the district because a development happens. There's only so much of a requirement that goes on to the developers, but then they're contributing storm basically into our system. And there are a lot of culverts. I have lots of pictures and I can show you guys. A lot of the culverts don't even have bottoms on them right now. They are basically 100% disintegrated. So there's a huge challenge in replacing a lot of the district's storm assets right now.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Go ahead, Councillor Lajeunesse.
I just have one, and I think you probably already answered it. And thanks for this report. I like charts and graphs. I like the visual and I understand the math behind it. But in terms of the general fund with maintenance, just a simple example, like maintenance has been factored into all these things, but a lot of the the kind of rural standard roads that we have, this one out here and many others like it. Back in the day, we used to run a grader up and down the road and pull the shoulders back in every year, and that hasn't been done in recent memory. And so I'm just wondering if small sort of maintenance costs like that are all factored in here. And I suspect they probably are.
They would be, and aside from bringing forward like the actual replacement, I work with Miss Gray annually in our budgets to try and increase our operational maintenance budgets. They have been very minimal since I've been here. $100,000 for annual paving, $50,000 for annual storm replacement. So with small budgets like that, we're trying to increase these levels sort of progressively, so we can get to the levels where we're actually doing larger sections or hiring contracted graders to go out and do more maintenance. But yes, they're factored into here, and I'm continuously working to look at increasing those levels so we can do more preventative maintenance, push out these life cycles a little bit longer.
Okay, so the recommendation is that council receive the report for information regarding the status update to the district's asset management program and financial strategy. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Beddoes. Any comments, Councillor St. Pierre, Beddoes, anyone else? Call the question. All in favor then? None opposed? That's unanimous. Okay, 10.4 operations update.
Thank you. To your worship, this is a high-level overview presentation. It's about 20 slides. I'm going to try and get through it in about half an hour here. There is essentially, we want to celebrate some of our successes in town. Between parks, subdivision, wastewater, engineering, which is essentially our public works and capital, we're underway with a lot of activities. So celebrating our successes is really important. There's in between the 4 different divisions and operations here. In the upcoming slides, I've identified a lot of our day-to-day, which is basically managing our operations, processing development applications, dealing with calls for service complaints. I've highlighted hours associated with that, trying to show what deficits are and what we're left with in each division to go forward with additional operational items as well as capital projects for council. So starting off with the Parks Department, all parks operational hours, and this is for operations and administration, there's about 14,300 hours within our work plans. The top line item there, 11,200, that's more pertaining to operational field workers. The remaining 3,100 hours is administration hours. So that's Miss Hooper's and Jessica's time. That's essentially managing day-to-day operations for their staff, managing the fleet maintenance and facilities administration, internal, external meetings, referrals, calls for service, and administrating parks permits. So this just demonstrates that with just doing the day-to-day is approximately 3,100 hours. One staff member equals 1,600 hours. So there's approximately 100 hours left, and this will fluctuate plus or minus 10-15%. This is the best estimate based on the last previous 2 years and going forward. So right now we're looking at approximately 100 hours left to complete operational parks items as well as capital parks items. So Ms. Hooper is stretched pretty thin with Jessica, underway with a lot of activities. Some of the operational projects that they've been working on, looking forward to putting together, bringing forward to council in 2023, a tree management educational strategy, working with Mr. Blewett on the development approvals program and part of the process reviews when it comes to applications and referrals, doing their annual or adornment, seasonal adornment, knotweed, harbor QC, natural assets, working with our consultants and myself in the asset management program. There's very limited time for all this stuff. So with 100 to 300 hours, it's one of the biggest challenges in parks, as well as engineering right now. We're really balancing our day-to-day as well as our operational projects, as well as our capital projects. And I have to say that that is probably one of our biggest struggles. We want to deliver high-level operational projects for council, as well as the community and capital projects, but we're having to pick and choose between pulling out of day-to-day to execute some of these operational projects and operational capital projects. The balance is very difficult for staff. We got a very committed staff. They're working extremely hard, but we are facing these challenges, and I want council to be aware of these challenges. Some of the parks capital projects, again, with the limited capacity that they've put forward and they're working on this year, they've completed the fire hall renovations. The potholes projects is in process right now with procurement, award, and construction anticipated going through 2023. We're engaged with consultants right now working on a whiff and spit plan as well as a town center plan. Whiff and spit plan is just in process of going forward with the consultants to develop it, and it'll be presented to council in 2023. And again, like I alluded to in the last meeting, this is more or less analyzing the climate impacts on the spit, as well as looking at parking configurations down there. The Lot A plans are currently on hold until development progresses and further conversations happen with Mr. Palau. Demamio Creek Bridge pedestrian crossing, we've completed the grant application that's been submitted. We're hoping to hear from that to see if we're successful in early 2023. Memorial Wall is in progress right now with procurement and construction anticipated in early 2023. Multi-use sports box has been complete, as well as the dog park is at substantial completion, with this just the gazebo remaining to go in 2023. Subdivision day-to-day, won't go through a lot of it. The slides are there for council's reference, but what it's showing is there's two staff in subdivision and land development. There's Mr. Blewett and Miss Zare, and right now they are taking on the management of the development approvals program. There's 400 hours allocated for that program to facilitate working, managing the consultants, and coordinating staff internally to work with the consultants in this review process. With that, there's a shortfall of about 700 hours. So right now, with the development approvals program, Mr. Blewett's doing an excellent job, but he is really trying to balance little bits of that in conjunction with the day-to-day operations. Moving forward in 2023, we're looking at working with consultants to facilitate more of the management of it, as well as basically working with staff and trying to take some of that off Mr. Blewett's plate, so the subdivision land development department can be at an appropriate capacity, still working at full capacity. With wastewater, capacity issues are good. We do not have capacity issues in wastewater department, but we do have them in the engineering department, because the engineering department actually functions as leading a lot of the wastewater projects that are going on. So wastewater model has been completely redeveloped. We've completed that. The centrifuge was installed and final completion was wrapped up near the end of 2021, beginning of 2022. Operationally, Mr. Bohemier has done excellent with flow monitor installations. We've strategically installed flow monitors, digital ones that are strategically placed through the district so we can monitor different levels of I&I. Those are being moved around sequentially, and they're also being used to update and refine the model redevelopment, working with engineering. VT SCADA integrations have also been completed, which is basically the control center for all the operations and computer controls that run the wastewater treatment plant. Huge undertaking, the master plan development. This is led by engineering. Town center master plan, we've completed that. That basically lays out a conceptual plan for any development that's in alignment with council's OCP for the town center, and what the appropriate plan is to be in place to facilitate the densification that's expected in the town center in alignment with the OCP. Caltassin whiff and spit feasibility studies master plan designs complete. Council is well aware we put a lot of work into this going through 2022. We're pending right now a major grant application. Following that grant application, we'd be moving on finalizing the designs for Caltassin and whiff and spit, if successful, from 80% to 100%, going forward with further public consultation, which has been and will be further presented to council. We're finalizing a force main and gravity main design that goes pretty much from the town center at Townsend all the way down to the wastewater treatment plant. Otter Point, Helgeson, Aranon, those are the remaining areas that aren't serviced by sewer right now. We're working with consultants on starting up the master plans for those areas. Right now, we're focusing in on Otter Point North, Helgeson, Aranon, and those two areas will be following 23, 24, 25. We're hoping to get through Otter Point going through 2023. Wastewater treatment plant expansion, just starting this up right now. It's a $6.5 million expansion. Construction has just started, and that is going to take us right through 2023 with substantial completion at the end of 2023 and finalization at the beginning of 2024. Alluding to this earlier, this is a complex project, but the SSA bylaw analysis, that's basically building on the response I had to Councillor St. Pierre, looking at what it looks like for the existing SSA post 2026, what it looks like with different models of having Caltassin and or Whiff and Spit included in alignment with the asset management expectations and all the O&M costs. Public consultation for these expansion areas is going to take up a lot of time, and it's going to be a necessity we're going to go forward with and present that to council following notification if we're successful with those major grants. Engineering, next one up here. It's a big struggle right now. I have to be completely honest with council. The piece up there is our day-to-day operations. This does not include any of the stuff that we're doing for wastewater. This does not include any of the stuff on the following slides for operational projects as well as capital projects. We have 3 engineering technologist position, a lead, a tech 2, and a tech 1. Right now, we have one of those positions in play. So between myself and the engineering manager, we're trying to use our time to complete the day-to-day. The next graph or slide will show a graph. So right now we're trying to maintain 4,600 hours of annual work with one technologist in place. We're backfilling right now currently 2 positions, which we've just backfilled one in 2023. At the beginning of the year, we will still be at a deficit because we're still trying to backfill the lead position. Hopefully we're successful in 2023, backfilling the lead position early in 2023. That will take care of engineering techs having capacity to do some of the day-to-day, but it will provide no capacity for any of these following operational and capital projects that we're engaging in. If we're successful with the charters grant application for $7 million and this wastewater treatment plant expansion, those 2 projects could take up 1 to 2 staff time, full time for the duration of the project. That does not include any of the other projects I will go over, operational or capital projects, on the next slides. There's a deficit in the engineering department for 1 to 2 staff members after these 2 positions are backfilled. Operational projects, and like I said, this is the biggest challenge for us. Our staff team in engineering and operations are working extremely hard. We're really trying to balance delivering on all the day-to-day while still trying to deliver on all the operational projects. Sometimes these operational projects will go on hold so we can focus on day-to-day, and my challenge is basically providing direction to all my staff and managers on where to find this appropriate balance. Pull off the day-to-day here, focus on the operational projects. These are some of the operational projects within the engineering department. I don't need to go through all of them. They're there for council's reference, but they take up a lot of staff time and they take up a lot of staff capacity, and they are all extremely important projects, as council can see. Some of the successes and capital projects completed in 2023 for engineering. We finalized both the Otter Point and Church corridors. They seem substantial completion at the end of 2021, beginning of 2022. We got everything wrapped up. Major project was undertaken on Phillips Road that addressed flooding issues for the entire storm or Sun River storm catchment area. Roundabout, we've worked hard with the consultants to finalize the final tender-ready design for the roundabout project, which we have a $500,000 grant opportunity that we were successful with. Working with the consultants to finalize the complete design for the Charters corridor, including all the failed sections in the creek crossing. 3 projects that are going to be carrying over for engineering are Otter Point, Grant Road sidewalk, completing the wraparound tying in the sidewalk on Otter Point to Grant Road, Manzer Road paving, as well as the top lift of Otter Point North. We've done some emergency patch repair out on Otter Point North. We're anticipating doing a final lift of asphalt going into 2023. And we also completed almost a kilometer of paving on Connie Road, which basically refurbished that entire corridor. Engineering design capital that we're working on. So aside from the capital projects, the design capital that we're working on right now, we basically completed the town center design conceptually, not only for roads and all the connections, but we've completed the wastewater design. Other design capital in progress with Throop Connector. So that's the main corridor going from Phillips up to Charters. We're at a 75% design. We're hoping to take that to a tender-ready state in 2023. Throop corridor is at a 50% conceptual, and that goes from Charters corridor all the way to Church Roundabout. Phillips corridor is in a 50% conceptual. We have not done much work on that. Again, it's a capacity thing. We pull off of these design projects because there's limited capacity. We move on to day-to-day, and it's all about us trying to balance the operational projects, the day-to-day, and these capital design projects. Charters corridor and Highway 14 intersection, that's at a 75% design. That's currently in council's 5-year financial plan. We're looking at pushing that out a year or two in the existing plan for council's consideration in their new 5-year financial plan. Reason for that is we're trying to push the intersection of Charters and Highway 14, which is a requirement for the BC housing development, to have that signalized and the amount of development that's going to occur down there. But we want that implemented as close as we can to when that Throop connector goes in, because it has to work in unison with that connector when that intersection is signalized. Just for a snapshot in operations, I don't need to go through all this, but that's a lot of the day-to-day that we're dealing with in operations. Those are the stats that are consistent with what we're seeing in 2022 and in 2021. In terms of calls for service, highway use permit applications, soil permit applications, subdivision applications, like Mr. Blue had alluded to. There was, I think, 50 plus last year. There's been over 150 this year. There are extensive amounts of things in day-to-day that are taking up 90 to 100% of staff's capacity. Some of the successes, we've been successful completing a lot of capital projects and being successful with some of the grant applications we put forward. These are a list of the grant applications that we've been successful with to date over the last couple of years, and in process of implementing some of these projects right now. Next slide is, so these are the ones that we've basically been successful with right now. A substantial amount of money, and the ones that we're pending applications on right now are also huge. Right now, once we backfill our engineering positions, we have enough to take care of the day-to-day. Just with these 2 grants being successful would take an extra position or 2 just to manage these projects, not including a lot of the operational projects I've alluded to in the previous slides. My hats off go to the engineering and planning staff here. We're truly trying to do a lot, and the biggest struggle in operations is trying to pick and choose and balancing our day-to-day delivery in terms of the development processing, design projects, and then balancing them with capital operational projects and capital design projects. It's taking up a lot of time, and there's a lot of picking and choosing, and staff really want to deliver on all of them, but there's capacity issues right now. And we're going to try and balance them as best as we can, but we may have to start cutting back on certain items. There's only so much capacity and so many hours in the day for us to progress with this magnitude of projects going forward. Engineering priorities, quickly, I'll go through these. Some of the things identified in 2023. Asset management, capital replacement funding considerations, that will be presented to council in 2023. We're finalizing that program with the urban systems right now. Public works maintenance contract, it's a massive undertaking. That contract is due in 2024. There's going to be a lot of staff time that has to go into refining that contract and making it better in 2023. Tender and construction of church roundabout and charters. Those projects will be put forward for council's consideration in the 2023 budget deliberations. We have a full grant opportunity for charters corridor, and we're sitting on a $500,000 opportunity that we've been successful with for the roundabout. Those are two major projects and two major successes if we were successful with that charters application this year or in 2023. Finalizing the development project, bylaw 404 consultation, and updating the master plans accordingly. That's full-on capital operational project through 2023. It will take up a bunch of staff capacity doing that project. TMP major corridor designs, again, it's not just the consultant's capacity, it's our capacity. They look for our direction on every single one of these designs. Field visits, conflicts, everything like that is the consultants just don't design the projects. We have to provide direction right through the process with these consultants, meetings with them, meetings on site, looking at different hold points on these designs. They take up a lot of time. Very important to finalize these designs. If they're not shelf ready, they're not as eligible for grant opportunities as they come up. Wastewater priorities going forward in 2023. Wastewater treatment plant expansion and the force main construction is going to take up pretty much most of 2023. Progressing wastewater master plans and going forward with Kaltassin and Whiff and Spit if we're successful with that grant opportunity. Massive project, great application, hope we're successful with it. Sewer parcel tax bylaw analysis, alluding to my comments to Councillor St. Pierre, another major undertaking. There's a lot of complex stuff to work with consultants and unwind in that. Final design, public consultation and implementation. A lot of work is going to go into those projects if we're successful with that grant opportunity for Kaltassin and or Whiff and Spit. Inflow and infiltration strategy, that's basically a normal. Mr. Bohemier looks after that on an annual basis. Parks and environmental services, again, like I said, outside of the day-to-day, limited with a few hundred hours capacity to work on capital projects and some of these operational projects. Development approvals program, high priority to finish that. Potholes project is underway. It'll be a high priority to finish that through 2023, as well as the memorial wall, which is underway, Whiff and Spit and town center master plans. Educational tree management strategy, and then pending council's budget deliberations. I know it may be a priority of council to go forward with the master plan in John Phillips Park as well. Subdivision land development, more or less the day-to-day processing applications, as well as working with consultants to finalize the development approvals program. And if I had to leave any strategic considerations for council through budget deliberations and through strategic planning processes, if I had to pick the top four, these would be the top four that I would leave with council for consideration. We want to deliver a lot in terms of fixing our processes and delivering the day-to-day on customer service, addressing operations and planning staff capacity challenges. We'll achieve this. It will allow us to achieve strategic deliverables of council. It will help with culture, morale, retention and attraction of staff, and provide excellence in customer service. Endorsement and commitment to an asset management financial strategy. With my response to Councillor Bateman, it's essential. It's sustainability. It's replacing all our assets, and it's providing funding mechanism to offset major grant opportunities and move forward with some of these strategic initiatives of council, such as implementing the transportation and parks and trail master plan. 3, completing the design and going forward with the implementation on the PTMP and TMP projects. These are hitting all the check marks. We've been successful with a lot of grants and we're hoping to be successful with the charters one. When these corridors are implemented and parks projects are realized, we're meeting some of the high level climate action strategies, providing multimodal transportation, public safety, faster emergency responses, dealing with the traffic congestion issues, as well as acquiring green spaces in Souk. Another big one is finalization and finalizing the official community plan through 2023. It's ultimately going to hit your climate action goals and it's going to provide clear community objectives, and staff will rely on that document in unison with other council master plans to progress on improving and bringing forward appropriate bylaw and policy amendments for council's consideration. I'll leave council with that operations update with what we're working on.
Okay, thank you for the update. It's a lot to process. I know that you provided it in advance, but it was a lot to sort of take in. I'm curious though, and it's more maybe a question for our CAO. It just, I appreciate the information, so I don't want to, and the work that goes into this. It just seems a bit, I'm wondering why it's here though, because this feels like an orientation type of piece. And so, well, I appreciate the information. Is this because is this an orientation piece for council and that's why it's here now? And then, because then we also we would be expecting something similar for all the departments, but that would be a lot to take in a regular council meeting.
So two pieces to this, and I'll let Mr. Schaefer add to it. Yes, this would be what similarly would be presented in the orientation. Council really wants to know what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. This is an excellent reference material to know what operations is doing on a day-to-day basis, to understand some of our challenges and things that we're working on delivering for council. And I'm going on leave for about 6 to 8 weeks. I may not be here for the orientation. So this would be an excellent piece for council to have as reference through budget deliberations, your orientation. If I was not here in time or came back prior to your orientation.
Okay, that's sort of what I thought, because otherwise I would highly recommend going forward that if council were to receive a report like this, that it should come to a committee of the whole. And because now sort of part of my goal or objective is preserving what I call everyone's mental brain capacity. And in this case, you know, when it's this much and council will want to weigh in, it's already 10 after 10. So how late do we want to be here is always the question, and how in tune is everybody after a long day, and you all need to get up early. So I just encourage that this should bounce to a committee of the whole in the future.
And your worship, I think that would be advisable in these types of situations. And certainly if Mr. Carter isn't able to return in time for the orientation that will be scheduled after either over the next couple of weeks or early in the new year, when we actually nail down the schedule for that, the manager, his manager group would be able to come in and address particular situations for this in his absence. But generally, this is the type of information that we would want to present in during the regular years at a committee of the whole, or and part of an orientation. So there will be an opportunity for council to ask more in-depth questions of either Mr. Carter or his managers after the turn of the new year. And there might be a limited utility in council really going on a deep dive in this right now. It was simply presented for preliminary information.
So council, I'm going to ask that we just sort of be mindful of the time, share the air. So like you are all entitled to 5 minutes each. There's 6 of us here. That's another half hour and we still have more on the agenda. So I'll open it up though for any questions. At this point, it's just to receive for information, knowing that we will have a second kick at the can in the orientation process. Okay. So. Okay, Counselor St. Pierre.
Look forward in future orientation, hearing how we might actually address some of the staffing issues. Thank you.
Counselor Bateman.
Yeah, so thank you very much for that. I found it fascinating. Great to get this update. I just want to be clear here. So it looks like engineering needs 2 full-time employees additional. Parks would be benefit with 1 full-time employee, and you're looking for a 0.5 full-time employee in operations. So there's 3.5 full-time employees. So will we see that brought forward in the provisional budget, these requests?
We've provided all our staffing requests to Ms. Gray by the end of August as part of staff's preliminary budget development.
Okay. And can Mr. Schaefer or Ms. Gray give us an update on other full-time employees that you'll be seeking?
I don't know that that's
That's
the
not appropriate
time
at this
right
time,
now
okay.
because we need a report. I think it would be reasonable that the department head of planning would give that presentation, corporate
it.
services, so we
Okay.
could see it all together. Rather than just this,
Yeah.
that, and the rest. I
Okay.
wouldn't be able to retain that.
All right. Well, thank you very much. It was great to get this education in the reality of day-to-day and operational ambitions. Thank you.
Mr. Schaefer.
And I might say that there are potentially other departments in the district that might be similarly challenged for staff time. We do have vacancies that we haven't been able to fill yet, which, you know, had we had full staff, the rubs might not have been quite as onerous. So recruiting and retaining staff is a challenge for us, and being at the end of Highway 14, as you say. And so there's a bigger picture to be considered when we start talking about individual positions.
Okay, thank you. So on that note, I'll look to receive the verbal report presented by the Director of Operations, moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Lajeunesse. Any further? Nope. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, 10.5 is a report regarding the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and the resolutions. So it's just, this is just Corporate Services has kindly provided this to us for our date. Very tight on time though. So it's here for information. So I'll look for a mover, please, to receive by Councillor Bateman and seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. All those in favor, please. And that's unanimous. Thank you. Bylaws 11.1. First one up is zoning amendment bylaws, so that council adopt the bylaws cited as zoning amendment bylaw number 600-92 2022. Moved by Councillor Lajeunesse, I guess. Seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. All those in favor, please. That's unanimous. Thank you. Next up is the report, Traffic and Highways Regulation Amendment Bylaw.
To your worship, it's just a clarification amendment to the bylaw that only facilitates permitting utilities within district statutory rights of way that are owned by private or public utility companies. I have nothing further to add than the information in the report.
Okay, procedurally, this would then trigger a public hearing or public input? Anything like that? We're going straight to third reading and then it'll come back to adoption. Okay. All right, just again, I talked about mental capacity. All right, the recommendation is that council give first, second, and third reading to the bylaw cited as Traffic and Highway Regulation Amendment Bylaw number 87267-05. Moved by Councillor Lajeunesse, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Comments? None? All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. There is no new business, so the next ones are here for information. 13.1 is a letter from the Ministry of Education and Childcare. So those of us at UBCM have been, did our piece on advocacy and the minister's changed. So we need to start all over again, but I think it's the case of, in the meantime, if staff could kindly help us by pulling every letter we've sent to a minister of education and a response, I'll task Counselor Bateman and I, and after sending a new Christmas card, we'll follow up and say, welcome to the Folio Minister, and here's where we're at. I know that cabinet shuffle, but it just makes us, I feel like we've been here in this seat before, and we have with different ministers. Let's think this is Minister 5 for education, maybe? Yeah. Okay, so I'm just looking for a, to receive for information, and we'll get to work on advocacy again. Moved by Counselor St. Pierre, seconded by Counselor Lajeunesse. We're gonna put some punch into this one though, Counselor Bateman. All those in favor? And that's unanimous, thank you. Next up is a letter from the South Island Prosperity Partnership, and they're looking for representation requests. So as it was in the past, we had Counselor Lajeunesse appointed with myself as his alternate. So should that work for everyone to continue? Yes? Okay, so
For me,
that council designate Counselor Lajeunesse to serve as the delegate for the South Island Prosperity Partnership until the next general local election. And that council designate Mayor Tate to serve as the alternate delegate for the South Island Prosperity Partnership until the next general. Moved by Counselor Bateman, seconded by Counselor Pearson. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. The next up, this is advocacy in action. So we've done a lot on the second generation anticoagulant rodenticides. And so sharing data about how this impacts owls and other type of species was very helpful as well. Thank you, Parks, for your information on the work that we're already doing, which is ahead of everyone else in BC, I might say, in terms of that we don't use these chemicals. And in that way, we have done very well in our own operations. It's just education out to the community on the impact. So what this is people will put out rat poisoning, the owls will ingest the rat and then die as a consequence. Very large problem in Saanich earlier, North Vancouver and Surrey in particular. So there is a lot of awareness going out, but this is where we're at. So it's just here to show the information that's common to receive for information. So moved by Counselor St. Pierre and seconded by Counselor Lajeunesse. Any comments at all, Counselor Bateman?
Yeah, I'll just quickly say that this is an example of Suit Council doing its share of the lifting on this, because it was back on September 14th, 2020. Counselor St. Pierre lifted from the correspondence file a motion. I think SPCA had sent it in. Council had a discussion at the next meeting. Councillor Beddoes and Councillor Logan's moved that we communicate with the appropriate provincial ministers. Councillor Mayor Tate, her chairness, and Councillor St. Pierre called for a complete ban on rodenticides, and this was formalizing existing practice. And we got Wildlife Suit to get involved in public education. And then you got involved on a provincial. Yeah, so good for us and other municipalities, Saanich and others who were all over this. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you for that summary, Counselor Bateman. So call the question. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Number 14, council verbal reports, your final opportunity for the year 2022, because we don't have another regular meeting until the new year. Fresh new year, no mistakes in it yet. Verbal updates, Counselor Beddoes.
Just if any council gets an opportunity in the next couple of days, pop into the community center and see them preparing for all the hampers. It will blow your mind away at the amount of stuff that they're getting ready to serve our citizens.
Thanks for lending a hand through that. Other councillors, Counselor Lajeunesse?
So December 1st, Counselor Bateman and I met with Kai Mountfort, a Suc resident who's working on his Masters of Public Administration and whose thesis is focused on Suc's developing OCP. Last Monday, Counselor St. Pierre and I attended a learning session on housing affordability at UVic hosted by the Community Social Planning Council. We ducked out during the break to meet with Dr. Krushenko, and I'm not pronouncing her name correctly, whom I'd met with at SIPS Rising Economy Week, and who's a faculty member at the School of Public Administration. She has student groups readily available to provide research in the areas of political economy and economic geography, land use planning and strategic spatial planning, community and economic development, territorial development policies, regional, rural, and urban, transportation and infrastructure policy, among many others. Last Wednesday, I attended Victoria Foundation's open house, and I'm going to be meeting with folks from there either this week or next to chat about upcoming leadership opportunities regarding their granting programs. They would like to have representation from Sook among their leadership because they feel that our nonprofits are often overlooked. So I'm looking forward to that. Last Thursday morning, stopped by the municipal hall with Councillor Bateman to judge the various departments' holiday decorations. Corporate services killed it. Engineering and planning were a close second. Fire and rescue might have been a contender if they hadn't recruited outside help for their window decorations. Thursday afternoon, I met with a couple of members of former ECDEV committees in which I had also participated. Introduced them to our new community ECDEV officer, Gail Scott. We discussed a range of opportunities and initiatives that you'll soon be hearing about. That's it.
Thank you. Other updates? Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, that was fun doing the judging at the Christmas decorations. Operations had Operations had all the burning log screensavers, which was a great touch, along with the Die Hard shrine, which I thought was a cut above. But, you know, the traditional approach of corporate services won the day. It was what decorations, the treats, and the live carol singer, I think was the key. So on Thursday last week, the Island Health Public Forum was held at the Community Hall, and the mayor was in Ottawa for FCM meetings. So I was her designate for the semi-annual visit by the Island Health Board of Directors. So it unfolded in two parts. There was a stakeholder luncheon, during which we looked at a local case study of a 30-something single mother with a 10-year-old son who she was caregiving for, as well as an aged grandmother. And we looked at gaps and existing services in Souk. And this single mom has mental health issues. It was quite fascinating to see how she might be able to navigate and where she could get no help whatsoever. So after lunch, there was the public presentation, which you can all view in full on YouTube. Surgeon's Mary Dunn provided a when, not if update on the Community Health and Urgent Primary Care Center that is envisioned for the Town Center Lot A as Evergreen Mall undergoes its expansion. So this is, the mayor wasn't there to offer a very clear, strong statement on the fact, but the fact is the district is dedicating the land on Lot A. The developer is prepared to build and lease the physical space. Surgeon is developing the proposal in collaboration with Island Health, West Coast Family Medical Clinic, and other partners. And the West Coast Family Medical Clinic itself is ready and able to move into the new space under the governance of Surgeon. So Mayor Tate had a very productive meeting with the health minister at the recent UBCM conference in Whistler. And I believe you're confident we're on the right track to get this thing happening with further support from the Ministry of Health. So do you want to speak to that at all?
Oh, well, thank you for that invitation. No, I'm kidding.
Madam Chair.
We're doing everything we can. And it's not, it falls outside the realm of local government, but we're in a crisis and we're doing what we can to help our residents. And so I was very annoyed that it was scheduled when I was away. Maybe that was because they didn't want me to be there. I'm not sure. But this has been a file now that I've been carrying for a long time. And quite frankly, I'm very annoyed with a lot of people. They're lucky I didn't show up with all the materials I saved because I hoard everything because it's their stuff. I'm taking that whole shrine with me. Counselor St. Pierre?
Just thought I'd get, end of year, I should give a verbal report on the ongoing progress of the farm hamlet model that I've been working on that was put forward some time ago, I think about a year and a half ago. So been ongoing meetings, sometimes weekly, more often bi-weekly, with the minister, which has recently changed. Thank you very much. That was wonderful. Sorry, wonderful relationship with Minister Popham. Look forward to a relationship with Pamela. Ooh. See that I don't even know the name from full, just Pamela Willis, I think. But anyway, having said all that, recent meetings have led to finally moving forward towards trying to develop an application. And we had a meeting of the minister planner, planner from the ALC, and our own Mr. Paolo, who is, everything was amazing. We've had some excellent news from the ALC staff, who seems to indicate that many of the things that we are hoping to achieve can actually be achieved at our own level through local government. We'll be determining further steps at a later date, exactly what else we might want to see in terms of changes at other levels. At this point in time, the legislation at the ministry level, at the provincial level, is not likely to change anytime soon. They've recently made changes. We're looking at trying to see how those changes affect everything and how much flexibility can now be achieved through the commission. So more news to follow. We're not going to give up, but it seems to be moving in a productive way. Thank you very much.
Counselor Pearson?
Along with all the other councillors, with the exception of the mayor, the committee of the whole last December the 5th, which was had different groups looking for their grants. And it went extremely well. It was an extremely positive meeting with a lot of information, which I won't go into. And everyone else has omitted that the Santa Claus parade was on December the 4th, which I had a very important job of herding for my grandchildren through, and their parents happy that I returned them at the end of the night without getting them lost. So, so anyways, that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. I'll give a thanks to Councillor Beddoes for holding things down as deputy mayor while I had my gums grafted together and then also went off to Ottawa. It was lovely. Councillor Bateman for attending and carrying that health file. And then Councillor Pearson working away on land use, Councillor Lajeunesse on local economic development, and always a focus on food security from Councillor St. Pierre. So thank you to all of you for the work that you're doing, as well as to our staff for holding down the fort as well. Just some highlights. Is the Timuc Treaty Advisory Committee. I'm acting chair right now until the committee convenes and meets and elects a new chair, which I'm not going to be running for, just so you know. But there is going to be a forum for all elected officials to join in January. So I'll confirm that date. The location is still being finalized. But it'll just bring everyone up to speed on where we are at in the modern treaty piece and also the reconciliation piece and what's also moving through the federal government as well. So it'll be updates for all of those pieces. You may know that at the CRD's inaugural meeting, I was elected as vice chair of the CRD board, and I am also vice chair of the Housing Corporation. And I have my folio of 4 committees, including chairing First Nation Relations and also the CRD's appointment to the Coalition to End Homelessness. So that is a big folio, but we had 5 committees, I think, normally. So it's one less. So Councillor Bateman and I will be busy as always. And then at the FCM meetings, the advocacy, it always is time this year to time in with the federal budget. So we receive a briefing from FCM staff. They find issues that impact all Canadian municipalities. And then we break down into smaller groups. So the focus this year was on infrastructure, asking again for the permanent doubling of the Community Works Fund, as well as a faster turnaround around the necessary infrastructure. Housing, recognizing the housing crisis that is apparent, support for climate action, mitigation and adaptation, And for us, it's for the federal government to absorb the retroactive RCMP unionization impacts. When we broke down into smaller groups on the RCMP piece, in one case I heard saying, oh, we'll have some answers soon and you should be quite happy with it. Later on, it was, we're not Santa. You can't just hand out money. So while you get kind of excited by one, you get sort of like, what is he talking about? So that's where we start pushing back a little bit. I did have the example to go to question period. On the way there, the cabinet here was being affirmed into office. So we were checking the Twitter feed while we were going there going, do you know this person and this person? Like, why did they shuffle this person? And having our own debrief all the way until they took our cell phones away. Because you can't bring them into question period. When I say I was somewhat appalled, I was. The behavior in the House is beyond dramatic now. I would never tolerate that sort of just disrespectful behavior, pounding of desks and yelling, and we can see everyone's screens too. So I'm like, you are not listening to anything this other person is saying, because I can look down and see exactly what you're doing. So not listening. The second day, because I went back a second day, it worsened. The speaker had to actually have somebody leave because there was sort of the a handbook, I guess, I found out of what you cannot absolutely do. And this person called somebody a liar and had to stand up and made that known. They're supposed to apologize. The individual refused to, so they had to walk out and were just suspended for that day. Couldn't vote anymore, couldn't participate, couldn't come back in the hall. And I'll name the Conservatives Party because they were clapping and applauding this to see their own member walk out in that state, head held high, and now unable to participate. So I find that just appalling. Some of the comments that came out from some of the members were like, wow, I don't even know what century you live in, but clearly we're not in the same century because of what you're saying. So that was just, that I think just sort of wound me up a bit. Some obviously have a background in local government, were advocating for their communities, and others clearly have no idea what local government does whatsoever. And this, I couldn't take notes because I would have, but I was just appalled by it. Later on, I did meet with our MP, and then just to strengthen, just to connect with Mr. Garrison and also on what our advocacy items are. He invited me to observe a committee. It was Northern and Indigenous Affairs. And again, this is a committee room of about this size, all party members represented. The chair was on Zoom, which was fine. And there was an MP from Nunavut that was sharing that in some of her communities, the houses are actually falling into the water because of the impact of climate change and the flooding. Residents are sleeping in shifts. They're packed in because they can't all fit into one home. So they have to trade. You sleep on this hour, we sleep on this time. A single pregnant mother committed suicide because she could not find housing anywhere because they're so overcrowded and the houses and the infrastructure are falling into the water. She also shared that in Manitoba, they're searching for there's a serial killer targeting Indigenous women, and they've been found in a landfill. And while she's sharing all of this, and I'm almost crying, 3 other MPs having a whole little conversation on their own, passing notes, like no decency to just sit and listen, just chatting away about nothing. I could practically hear them. Like I just wanted to stand up and yell, but I couldn't because I'm a member of the public. And I don't think the chair caught it because he was on Zoom and nobody raised a point of order. But the disrespect there, it's really upsetting that is happening at that level. I sort of held them in much higher esteem, and it's just so disappointing to see that happen. When we talk to other mayors about the crisis around housing and homelessness, we like to say, oh, they've come from this community and they've moved here. No, like it's impacting everyone all over the place in different ways. In some cases, it's because we have communities that have been permanently damaged by wildfire, permanently damaged by flooding, mudslides. And in particular, Indigenous communities were put in the most precarious places that are being hit first and the hardest, and they're displaced. So there are communities like ours that are doing their utmost to help. But when we think of climate refugees, these aren't refugees from other countries per se. They are our own Canadians that are in really dire circumstances. So it's a significant issue. So it was great to be sort of part of the solution in terms of framing the ask. But I'll be watching that budget very closely to see where it comes in. But maybe sometimes when it's like, gee, why didn't we get this? Well, it's just the perspective is that they seriously need to send money to some of these northern places to get that housing in place. And so when they're asking questions, I'm like, I have a good answer. Like, did you consult with local governments on this? Have you been doing this sort of consultation when you're railroading this money through? Some cases it seems that way, in other cases it isn't. But yeah, I'll get the nightmare of question period out of my head at some point soon. It's just nice to be back in local government where it's civil and respectful. And we actually listen to one another and don't pound on tables. It's just ridiculous. I couldn't believe that. That was just horrible. Other than that, it was good flights home. So thanks to everyone for keeping everything going. I was going to ask a question, what in Sooke, what do dance and hockey have in common? Dance and hockey. Dance and hockey. What do they have in common and what do they produce? No, the Nutcracker in Sooke. So Sooke Dance, local nonprofit, great variety, beautiful show, Nutcracker, and hockey came in and did the concession. So two not-for-profits working together, excellent table of homemade goods, each supporting one another. So I was in my hockey mom mode the other day working the concession to raise money for tournament fees. So that's a whole other hashtag I can add to me. But yeah, I thought it was just great to see the two groups working together and everyone was excited in that way. So only in Sooke, meanwhile in Sooke, well done to everybody. So on that note, wish everyone who's still watching or plan to watch us at the later date a safe holiday season. Drive safely because you know that the RCMP will pull you over otherwise if they said so. They're very determined. They do a very effective job. So maybe we can all not make that target for them, in which case that means everyone is traveling home safely, right? And to all of you, be well over the holiday season. Take good care of yourselves and others, and all the best to your family and friends. So on that note, motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Lajeunesse. All in favor? None opposed?